Chapter 484. Looking at the distant thunder and lightning in the night sky, Nagato's indifferent face had a dignified expression. Konan, who was standing on the side, also frowned. Her delicate face was full of doubt. Who forced Hiriko to this point? Did other members of Amitsukami appear? The destructive power of mist release is one of the best among all Kekkei Genkai. Because of this, mist release chakra consumes a lot of energy. Even Hiriko won't easily use mist release unless it's a critical moment. Soon, Zetsu poked his head out of the ground and reported to Nagato on the cliff. Obsidian reported, "That guy from Amitsukami is unexpectedly difficult to deal with. I'm afraid that Hiriko won't be able to complete the mission." Obsidian was a little puzzled. Doesn't Hiriko have nether release? How can he not be able to defeat that magnet release ninja from Amitsukami? Nether release is almost fatal to ninjutsu ninjas. As long as it's not a powerful Kekkei Genkai, like the 3-generation Suchikage, ordinary ninjutsu, even some Kekkei Genkai can't resist the direct effect of nether release on chakra. Zetsu curled his lips and said, "That magnet release ninja from Amitsukami is ridiculously strong. He was able to suppress Hiriko one-on-one." Konan sighed. No wonder Amitsukami sent him first. It seems that he is not an abandoned child of Amitsukami, but a trump card of Amitsukami. Zetsu asked, "What should we do now?" Nagato took a step forward and walked to the edge of the cliff and said in a flat tone, "No matter who it is, no one can stop me from punishing Mai. I will send 6 paths of pain to completely raze Mai to the ground." After saying that, Nagato turned his head and looked at Obsidian. "You also go, kill that member of Amitsukami, and let Mortal Path extract his soul. This time, I will uproot Amitsukami." The masked man nodded and disappeared into the twisting vortex in a flash. Zetsu also wriggled his body and quickly shrank into the ground. My village. Staring at Hyojin's right hand that caught the lightning with his bare hand, Hiriko's expression fluctuated. "This is periosteum." Amidst the wisps of green smoke, Hiriko noticed the white periosteum on Hyojin's right hand that was slowly retracting under his skin. Damn it, his corpse bone vein is completely different from the lotus. After witnessing the sharpness of Hyojin's bone blade, as well as the toughness of his bone membrane, Hiriko immediately realized that Hyojin's bone vein was on a completely different level from the Mist Squad's bone vein. With this thought in mind, Hiru's figure flashed, and he suddenly retreated. This was the first time he felt a sense of danger since the start of the battle. He took the initiative to distance himself from the enemy. His arm that was cut off by Hyojin's bone blade was tied up by Ghost Sprout's gel and dragged on the ground, retreating with him. Puff! At this time, Hyojin coughed up another mouthful of blood, but he didn't care. His figure only paused for a moment, then immediately rushed forward. He will never give Hiriko a chance to breathe. Cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots is his style. At this time, he was holding a bone blade in each hand, and a sharp bone spike protruded from his elbow. His whole body was like a wisp of wind, chasing after Hiriko, who was shrouded in lightning. From time to time, he would slash his blade and cut a part of Hiriko's body into pieces. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! The flustered and exasperated Hiriko gradually felt fear from the bottom of his heart. His invincible steel release couldn't block the opponent's bone blade at all. The bone blade in the opponent's hand was so sharp that it was terrifying. Or rather, the bone blade had already surpassed the level of sharpness. It seemed that there was something hidden in it that made his steel release completely unable to block it. Looking at the battle between Hyojin and Hiriko, Jiraiya and Tsunade, who were not far away, were dumbfounded. Jiraiya said with a sigh, "So it turns out that one can reach this level just by relying on physical skills." Each of Hyojin's moves and styles seemed to have no fixed pattern. They looked natural and casual, but each of them was thrilling. Hiriko's physical skills had already reached the peak, but in the face of Hyojin's increasingly fierce offensive, he was at a slight disadvantage and was completely suppressed. Many parts of his body, such as his arms, shoulders, and so on, have been cut into pieces. If it weren't for the Ghost Sprout's gelatinous substance forcefully holding them together, Hiriko's body would have already fallen apart. But even so, Hiriko wouldn't be able to hold on for long. It was only a matter of time before he was defeated. However, Tsunade's eyes were solemn as she said, "Did you notice that Kamikaze's taijutsu style of Amatsukami has many traces of Konoha's taijutsu, Uchiha's taijutsu, Hyuga's taijutsu, and even some Konoha's taijutsu?" Boom, boom, boom. Without waiting for Jiraiya to answer, a loud rumbling sound came from all around the village. Immediately afterward, a series of beast howls came one after another. Jiraiya hurriedly jumped onto the ruins of a tall building and looked around. He found that many huge summoning beasts had invaded the village, and these summoning beasts all had the symbolic black stick of Nagato's summoning beast on their bodies. Jiraiya said bitterly and helplessly. Nagato finally made his move. Naruto's office. Naruto-sama. A suspicious person with Rinnegan has appeared in the Eastern District. Naruto-sama. A suspicious person with Rinnegan has also appeared in the Western District. Naruto-sama. The same thing happened in the Southern District. One after another, my Umbu entered the office and reported the latest news to 3 generations. 3 generations calmly asked, "Describe the appearance of the suspicious person." The Umbu members immediately described the appearance of the suspicious people in each area to the Hokage-sama in detail. After listening to the description of the Umbu, 3 generations couldn't help but think, all of them have yellow hair. It seems that these should be human puppets controlled by Nagato. Although the last raid on the Hidden Rain village failed to harm the Akatsuki organization, they managed to collect a lot of information about the organization. For example, the 6 Paths of Pain with Rinnegan is just a puppet controlled by Akatsuki's leader, Nagato. This crucial information was collected during the last raid. After pondering for a moment, 3 generations ordered the Shadow Guard captain next to him. Inform the 4 shadows, prepare to attack at any time. Although Nagato hasn't appeared in person yet, the appearance of the 6 Paths of Pain means that he has already made his move and may arrive at any time. On the battlefield, listening to the roars of summoning beasts around him and feeling the violent tremors on the ground, Hyojin realized that Nagato might have already made his move, so he slightly slowed down his attack on Hiriko and secretly raised his guard. At this moment, a distortion appeared behind Hyojin without warning and began to separate him from time and space. Chapter 485. Kamui. Kuroda was startled by the familiar feeling of stripping from his back. Even if he was mentally prepared, even if he was already secretly on guard, when the time came, no matter how experienced he was in battle, he still couldn't help but feel a little nervous in his heart. In just a moment, he found several suspicious sources of chakra in his field of vision. But at this time, he didn't have the time to identify which source of chakra was Obsidian's real hiding place. He only had a short 2 or 3 seconds to break free. If he couldn't get rid of Obsidian's Kamui in these precious 2 or 3 seconds, the consequences would be self-evident. The distortion of his body became more and more serious, and the numbness of being stripped of time and space almost filled Hyojin's body, making him unable to control his body freely. This feeling was even stronger than when he was in the Mist Collection. Obviously, after retrieving his left eye, Obsidian's pupil power became stronger. Should I give up this clone body? Countless thoughts in his mind scattered in an instant, and then instantly gathered back. No, never. Hyojin's expression changed. He suppressed the panic and uneasiness in his heart, emptying all his thoughts, leaving only a strong fighting spirit in his heart. Dance of the Early Fern. Boom, boom, boom. Accompanied by the tremors of the earth, Hyojin unreservedly activated the strongest secret technique of Bone Vein. In an instant, one thick bone spear after another rose from the ground. At the same time, a bone spear directly penetrated Hyojin's body, wrapping Hyojin's body that was completely distorted and was about to be stripped out of time and space. The moment his body merged with the bone spear, Hyojin immediately activated the ability of Bone Vein and changed his position in the bone spear. Swoosh, at this time, Kimui was completed. A huge circular hole suddenly appeared on the originally tough and thick-boned spear. And this circular hole was the place where Hyojin was just a moment ago. The appearance of the huge circular hole instantly snapped the bone spear in half. Suijin's incomparably tough bone spear didn't even have the slightest room to resist the attack of the space-time ninjutsu Kamui. Obsidian, who was hiding in the dark and witnessed all this, frowned. From the moment Hyojin activated Dance of the Early Fern, he felt that something was wrong. At the same time, he was very puzzled. How could Hyojin's Dance of the Early Fern be launched so quickly? Almost in the blink of an eye, a large white bone forest was erected. If I knew this, I would have been closer. Obito didn't expect that Suijin would use this method to escape the lock of his Kimui, which caught him off guard, and at the same time, he also felt a little regretful. After all, he only had one chance to sneak attack Suijin. After obtaining Kimui, although he can use Kimui from a long distance, but the farther the distance from the target, the slower the activation of Kimui will be. When he launched the sneak attack just now, he hid in a ruin about 300 meters away from Hyojin. So from the time he launched Kimui to the time it was completed, it took at least 4 to 5 seconds. 4 to 5 seconds is actually just a few breaths of time, and it was a sudden attack without any warning. An average ninja would need 1 or 2 seconds to react, so it is more than enough to deal with ordinary ninjas. But against a member of Amatsutsukami, this time is slightly long. The bone forest that was constantly rising from the ground almost scared everyone on the scene. One after another, sharp-boned spears suddenly emerged from the ground, and ordinary people didn't even have the time to dodge. Hiriko, who had Hakushin, was almost directly pierced by the bone spears, and he only managed to avoid them by a hair's breadth. The situation on my side was even more chaotic. However, to the surprise of my ninjas, these bone spears seemed to have a mind of their own and actively avoided them, causing a large group of people to be scared in vain. After calming down, everyone looked at each other. From the time Hyojin was attacked by Kimui to the time he launched Dance of the Early Fern and escaped with the help of the bone forest, the whole process only took a few seconds. So, except for Hiriko, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and a few others, most of my ninjas had a blank expression on their faces, completely unaware of what happened. At this time, Jiraiya, who has once again entered Sage Mode, shouted loudly, "A new enemy has appeared. It's the guy from Akatsuki that can use space-time ninjutsu. Everyone be careful." In Sage Mode, Jiraiya can perceive Chakra's location without the need for vision. So although he can't accurately find Obsidian's location due to the distance, but he knows that Obsidian has already appeared on the battlefield. After receiving Jiraiya's warning, all the my ninjas, including Tsunade, quietly used the shadow clone technique to hide their real bodies. In the last raid on the Rain Village, the village also collected a lot of information about Obsidian, although they haven't found a way to completely restrain Obsidian's Kimui, but some methods to confuse and resist Kimui have already been passed on to the Umbu and Jonin through intelligence books. Jiraiya then said to Tsunade next to him, "I'm going to support Kimui of Amatsutsukami. You will be the backup." Tsunade nodded heavily. The current situation is 2 members of Akatsuki, although Amatsutsukami's members should also be hiding in the dark. But no matter what, as Mai's ninja, Tsunade will not allow Mai's side to just be a spectator. On the other side of the bone forest, Hiriko was panting heavily while loudly complaining to Obsidian. "Why are you only here now? Quickly kill that bastard." Although he doesn't want to admit it, Hiriko has to accept the fact that he can't kill the member of Amatsutsukami in front of him alone, so he can only take a step back and join forces with Obsidian. In his view, although his strength is not as good as Hiriko, but the fact that Hiriko vomited blood repeatedly means that there is something wrong with his body. As long as he joins forces with Obsidian, killing Hiriko is a sure thing. Swish! As soon as his voice fell, half of Hiriko's body poked out from a thick bone spear behind him, and without a word of nonsense, he raised his hand and slashed down. The sharp bone blade glinted with a cold glint as it slashed across Hiriko's neck, and a thin line of blood splattered out. Immediately afterward, Hiriko's lifeless head flew up into the air. Tisk, leaving only a faint sound of disdain. The figure retracted back into the bone spear and disappeared without a trace. Once the dance of the early fern is activated, the entire bone forest will become a part of Hyojin's body. Unless Kim Yui can sweep away the entire bone forest, otherwise, it won't be able to do anything to him. Therefore, the number of enemies has become meaningless to him. If he can fight one, he can fight 100, and with the Type A Wind Release clone, he is not afraid of any enemy under the Sixth Path Realm. Chapter 486. Swish. As soon as Hyojin's figure retracted into the bone spear, a shuriken with a diameter of 1 meter flew out from behind and hit the bone spear with a whistling sound. In an instant, a twisted vortex appeared out of thin air, and the entire upper half of the bone spear was stripped away from the space-time continuum. Then, the huge black shuriken's momentum did not decrease. It flew around in a circle, and the twisted vortex appeared frequently, peeling off 7 or 8 towering bone spears in a row. In the blink of an eye, the bone forest in the area where Hiriko was located was cleared. Boom! With a loud noise, a blue Susanoo appeared in the area where the bone spears were cleared. Obsidian glanced at Hiriko's decapitated body on the ground, and his eyes under the mask were full of ridicule. In fact, Obsidian had the opportunity to act earlier, but he did not do so because Hiriko has always been a confidant of Nagato, and this is very disadvantageous to him. So he has been looking for opportunities to pull the powerful Hiriko to his side. After all, it is only a matter of time before conflict breaks out between him and Nagato. In other words, Nagato is the final obstacle to the Eye of the Moon project. At this time, Jiraiya suddenly jumped out of the bone forest and shouted, "Immortal Art, 5 Guards Gate." Clatter, Jiraiya in the middle sprayed oil. Immortal Fukasaku on one side used Wind Release, and Immortal Shima on the other side used Fire Release. Under the infusion of the Immortal Art Chakra, a sea of fire surged out, illuminating the entire night sky red. Obsidian frowned, and with a thought, his blue Susanoo spread a pair of wings behind it and flew into the air. Because of the implantation of the Hashirama cells, Yin Release and Yang Release have achieved a preliminary fusion, and they have a certain degree of the power of the Genjutsu. Therefore, although the Sharingan in Obsidian's eye sockets is not the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, it can activate the almost complete form of Susanoo, giving it the ability to fly. Jiraiya didn't expect that Obsidian Susanoo could fly, so he was surprised. At this time, Jiraiya's immortal technique had already devoured a large part of the bone forest. No matter how tough Hyojin's bone spear was, it could not withstand the fire escape art, the wind escape art, and the special oil, as well as the immortal technique chakra, the 5 right guard gate. Crack! Under the continuous crisp sounds, the bone spears shattered one after another in the sea of fire. At this time, Hyojin poked out from a bone spear in the distance and looked at Jiraiya with a speechless face. No matter how overbearing Obsidian's Kinui Shuriken was, it could only peel off 7 or 8 bone spears at a time, and Hyojin's bone vein could recover in an instant. Jiraiya, with his immortal technique, directly burned a large part of the bone forest. Jiraiya was also a little embarrassed and said repeatedly, "Sorry, I didn't expect him to fly." Jiraiya's move was actually not a bad move. If Obsidian Susanoo couldn't fly, he could use this move to test whether Obsidian could still annihilate himself after activating the Susanoo, or whether he could annihilate his Susanoo. After all, even if it was Susanoo, it would still be very dangerous to resist an immortal technique like the 5 right guard gate. If Obsidian could annihilate himself or annihilate his Susanoo, he would definitely not choose to resist it head-on. Hyojin didn't care too much about this. He turned his head and looked in the direction where Hiriko's body was. At this moment, that area was already a sea of fire. Everything on the ground was burned clean by the 5 right guard gate. Even the gravel was burned into a small piece of sand. If Obsidian didn't have time to deal with Hiriko's body just now, then no matter what kind of secret means Hiriko had, no matter what kind of magic the Ghost Sprout had, he would definitely be dead. But because he was in a hurry to avoid Obsidian's Kamui shuriken, Hyojin didn't notice what Obsidian did just now. Flying in the air, Obsidian looked down at Hyojin and Jiraiya and said jokingly, "I'm very curious. How long can your dance of the early fern and sage mode last?" After saying that, Obsidian directly removed the susu in the air, and in a whirlpool, his whole body disappeared, leaving only his laughter echoing in the air. Jiraiya said anxiously, "Oh no, he must have chosen another target." Jiraiya thought to himself, if it was him, he would also avoid the enemy's strong people and attack the enemy's weak points, but my village is so big, everywhere can become a target. Standing on a towering bone spear, Hyojin's expression was calm. He had a feeling that Obsidian didn't leave. Suddenly, the surroundings quietened down. The originally noisy beast howls, the intense sounds of battle, and the intermittent sounds of explosions all gradually subsided. Hyojin's expression became serious. What's going on? Not only Hyojin, but also Jiraiya, Tsunade, and the surrounding my ninjas also noticed that something was wrong. Walking out of the ruins, Kurenai asked doubtfully, "Did the enemy retreat?" Kakashi said with a solemn face, "I'm afraid it's not that simple. We'd better be vigilant." At this time, standing on the bone spear, Hyojin raised his eyebrows and suddenly looked up at the distant sky. In the sky above the center of the village, a figure in a red cloud was quietly floating in the sky, with his arms spread out as if he was doing something. Feeling a huge chakra fluctuation, Jiraiya, who was in sage mode, also found the figure in the air and cast his gaze towards the direction of the figure. Jiraiya frowned. He didn't know why he suddenly had a very bad feeling. Immediately, Jiraiya shouted, "No matter what he's doing, we must stop him." Hyojin said calmly as he made a seal, "It's too late." As soon as Hyojin's voice fell, a slightly majestic voice came from the distant sky. "Shinra, Tensei." Boom, boom, boom. A huge shockwave swept through the center of the village and quickly spread in all directions. Everything in the way of this shockwave was mercilessly crushed. Buildings and streets were swallowed by the shockwave. The constantly spreading shockwave was like a giant beast, devouring everything. Smoke and dust filled the sky, covering everything in an instant. The originally dark night became even darker, and one couldn't even see their own fingers in front of them. Looking at the shock wave coming toward them, Kurenai was stunned, and Kakashi also showed a complicated expression of shock and helplessness. Gale even subconsciously jumped on Shiyin and protected her under his body. Just when everyone was ready to face the impact, a boundless black iron sand curtain suddenly spread out. From the sky, it looked like a black blanket, instantly covering a large area of the village. Chapter 487. Sizzle. The lights above her head flickered, emitting a sound of poor contact. Hinata, whose face was covered in dust, was in a daze like a kitten. She was completely in a trance. "Someone save me. It hurts. I want my mother. I want my mother." At this time, shouts of varying strength, intermittent moans, and painful wails came from all corners of the shelter. They overlapped with each other, causing the shelter to fall into a strange noise. Hinata looked around in a daze. Everything was dark in front of her. The long row of lights on the dome of the shelter had been extinguished. The few remaining lights were also flickering because of the damage. In addition, gravel and dust kept falling from the top, causing the shelter to be filled with smoke and dust. Even the scenery that was only 3 to 4 meters away could not be seen clearly. Suddenly, a figure rushed in front of Hinata, shook her, and asked, "Hey, are you hurt?" Hinata's white eyes slowly focused at this time, and there was some spirit in them. Immediately, she saw the figure in front of her clearly and replied, "Are you Naruto, Kun? I'm not hurt. Looking at you just now, I thought you were hurt." After muttering softly, Naruto quickly picked up the pile of gravel beside Hinata. Only then did Hinata realize that Zun, who was originally beside her, was buried in the pile of gravel. She exclaimed and hurriedly helped Naruto lift the gravel. Soon, the two little guys finished clearing the gravel and found that Zin was not the only one buried under the gravel. Zhu Sui used her body to protect Yuan, protecting Ziyuan under her body. After rescuing Zhu Sui and Ziyuan, Hinata asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Zhu Sui shook her head weakly. Although she was buried in the gravel, fortunately, the gravel was not too big, so she only had some bruises on her back, and her life was not in danger. Ziyuan, who had come to her senses, burst into tears. At the moment, Ziyuan was very scared, because the tragic scene she saw in the death prophecy seemed to be coming true little by little. Not far away, Sasuke's mother looked around and looked at the shocking scene. Her face was heavy, and she told Sasuke beside her, "Sasuke, go help the others." Although Sasuke was only 8 years old, in the ninja world, he was already able to go to the battlefield at this age. During the Third Shinobi World War, many children under the age of 8 had already gone to the battlefield, and Itachi had seen the cruelty of war at the age of 4. So in the eyes of Sasuke's mother, Sasuke was not only her son, but also a ninja of Uchiha. Looking at his mother's injured and bleeding leg, Sasuke hesitated. "But your leg? I'm fine, you don't have to worry about me." With that, Sasuke's mother also opened her Sharingan and gently rubbed Sasuke's head. "Don't forget, I'm also a ninja." Sasuke no longer hesitated, got up and shouted to Naruto, who was not far away. "Naruto, let's go. Let's go save the others." "Oh," Naruto quickly responded. At this time, Hinata whispered, "Naruto-kun, can I go with you? I have the Byakugan. Maybe I can help." Sasuke walked over, looked Hinata up and down, and said arrogantly, "You can follow us, but you have to be smart. Don't get in the way." Hinata bowed happily. "Thank you, Sasuke-kun." In the dark shelter where smoke and dust billowed, the three little guys walked all the way together. Fortunately, with Hinata's Byakugan, they could rescue some of the Mai villagers who were buried under the rubble from time to time. A moment later, they came in front of a collapsed boulder. Looking at the completely collapsed tunnel in front of him, Hinata took a deep breath and couldn't help but ask, "How did this happen? What happened just now?" Naturally, Naruto couldn't answer. He went forward to push the boulder blocking the tunnel, but found that it couldn't be pushed at all. As Sasuke thought about it, he said casually, "Our shelter is dozens of meters underground. Even if there was a huge explosion on the ground, it shouldn't have affected this place." Naruto curled his lips. Then why did so many places in the shelter collapse? Sasuke was speechless and said angrily, "How would I know? But something must have happened to the ground." Hinata said worriedly, "I wonder how father is now." Hearing Hinata's words, Sasuke was also faintly worried. But he soon thought to himself, "My father is the patriarch of the Uchiha clan. He will definitely be fine." Tap, tap. At this moment, there was the sound of unhurried footsteps coming from the dim tunnel. Sasuke and the others quickly turned around and found a black shadow walking towards them. When the other party approached, Sasuke immediately recognized the identity of the visitor and said, "It's you, Hyuga Ningtse." Just as Ningtse was secretly paying attention to Sasuke, Sasuke has also been secretly paying attention to Ningtse, who is known as a genius, so he recognized Ningtse at a glance. Ningtse glanced at the people in front of him and immediately said to Hinata, "Miss Hinata." Hinata quickly returned the greeting, "Brother Ningtse." Naruto scratched his head and said, "The way they address each other is so strange." Sasuke crossed his arms over his chest and explained coolly, "What do you know? Hinata is the eldest daughter of the Hyuga family, and her status is equivalent to my brother's status in the Uchiha clan. Ningtse is just a member of the Hyuga family responsible for protecting the Hyuga family. Although they are relatives, Hinata is the master of the family, and Ningtse is just a retainer." Naruto muttered, "They are obviously relatives of the same age. Why do they have to distinguish between master and retainer? The Hyuga clan is really confusing." Sasuke glanced at Naruto disdainfully. "Idiot, there are many rules in a rich family like us." Listening to Sasuke and Naruto openly discuss the difference in status between the Hyuga family and the branch family in front of him, Ningxi's face was burning. As he grew older, Ningxi gradually understood the difference between the branch family and the main family, and gradually understood his position in the family. He didn't dislike protecting Hinata, but he hoped to protect his sister as a brother, not as a branch family. At this moment, Ningxi suddenly shouted, "Be careful!" With that, Ningxi subconsciously pulled Hinata back. Sasuke and Naruto also reacted and retreated far away. Boom! Not long after they retreated, the boulder blocking the passage was blown up. Through the breach, several little guys found that in the passage at the other end, several my ninjas were fighting fiercely with a ninja in a red cloud suit. After seeing the identity of one of the my ninjas, Hinata exclaimed, "It's Sister Ling." Chapter 488. In a narrow passage of the shelter, several figures were fighting fiercely. Bang! In a muffled sound, a figure was kicked out and hit the wall. Damn it! The person who was kicked away was none other than Mitarai Anko, who was in charge of guarding the sanctuary. There were a total of 5 teams stationed in the shelter, with a total of 20 outstanding my ninjas. But since they encountered the Akatsuki member who invaded the shelter, the members of the team were killed one after another. Until now, only Red Bean was left among the 20 my ninjas. If it wasn't for the chance encounter with Mute, Kuroto, and Uchiha Izumi, Red Bean would have died in the hands of the Akatsuki member. Bagua 64 palms. Belle, who had activated the Byakugan, used the Mute as a cover, moved behind the enemy, and used all her strength to use the strongest soft fist technique she had mastered. Pa pa pa. In an instant, a series of crisp palm strikes sounded in the passage. Mute and Uchiha Izumi looked at each other and said happily, "Got it. The Hyuga clan soft fist can directly destroy the enemy's meridians." On the surface, it seems that the enemy was not seriously injured, but the internal meridians may have been completely destroyed by the soft fist. But at this time, the strong enemy who had suffered a full set of Bagua 64 palms didn't seem to be affected at all. He turned around and kicked Bell, who was behind him. This Mute, who had almost used up his chakra, was stunned. On the side, Uchiha Izumi, who had 2 Sharingan activated, was trembling in fear. The enemy was too strong, so strong that she almost lost the will to fight. At this time, the Akatsuki member turned around and walked step by step toward Mute and Uchiha Izumi. Staring at the Rinnegan in the opponent's eye sockets, Mute fell into despair. The enemy not only has amazing insight, but his body can also launch missiles. They fought hard for a long time, and finally created an opportunity, but they found that the opponent's body was immune to the soft fist attack. Uchiha Izumi's legs softened, and she fell to the ground. Red Bean, who was not far away, struggled to get up, but her throat suddenly became hot, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. She fell to the ground again and shouted unwillingly, "Don't let him enter the shelter." Undoubtedly, the one who invaded the shelter was the Azura path of the 6 paths of pain. Because the previous Azura path was destroyed by Suijin, so this is a brand new Azura path, but just like the previous Azura path, it is also a sturdy fatty. It stood in the passage and glanced indifferently at the few my ninjas who blocked it, and immediately raised its hands. Ka ka ka. With a mechanical sound, many missiles appeared on the raised arms of the Azura path, aiming at the few my ninjas in the passage. Swish. Just when Xiang Ling, Mute, and the others thought that they couldn't escape, suddenly a shuriken shot from the other end of the passage. The Azura path didn't move, but slightly tilted its head, avoiding the shuriken, and then looked at the other end of the passage. Fire release. Great fireball jutsu. In an instant, a fierce flame shot from the other end of the passage. The Azura path raised its arms to protect its face and still didn't dodge, using its body to resist the fire release jutsu. Through a moment of observation, it has judged that the strength of the fire release jutsu won't cause too much damage to it, and its body can completely resist it. But just as the flames were about to dissipate, a few black shadows rushed over under the cover of the flames. The Azura path quickly noticed that the ones rushing at the front were 2 7 or 8 years old children, one with yellow hair and the other with black hair, one on the left and one on the right, rushing through the gap beside it. Then, the 2 children with Byakugan simultaneously put on a soft fist posture and attacked. A group of children, Azura Dao, had a look of disdain on his face. However, when he was about to raise his hand to block the attack, he realized that his body was bound by several steel wires. At that moment, he noticed that the first wave of imps that charged past him were holding on to several specially processed steel wires that were so thin that they could not be seen. In this moment of delay, when the Azura path broke the steel wires that entangled itself, the 2 children with Byakugan were already in front of it. Clap, 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 another crisp sound of palm strikes rang in the passage. This time, it was different from the sneak attack from Kuroto's back. It was a full frontal attack, and the 2 children were fiercely attacking the weak points of the human body. After the attack was completed, the 4 children, Sasuke, Naruto, Ningxi, and Hinata, panted heavily as they observed the results of the battle. This was the first time for them to experience such an actual battle. However, the Azura path just shook its neck, and then the corner of its mouth curled up, revealing a smile. Together with the chubby face of the Azura path, it was a charming smile, but in the eyes of the 4 children, it was extremely terrifying and creepy. Then, the Azura path slowly raised its hand and aimed at the 4 children. Hinata and Ningxi. At this time, Kuroto rushed over and protected the children behind her. The Azura path aimed at Kuroto and the children's arms, and with a violent chakra reaction, its light cannon flashed with a dazzling blue light. In an instant, the originally dark passage of the sanctuary became as bright as day. The children behind Kuroto were all shivering. At this moment, they deeply understood the cruelty of the ninja world and the horror of life and death. Facing the light cannon aimed at her, Kuroto was actually not much stronger than the children behind her. She bit her lips, and in despair and fear, she shouted loudly, "Kuroto!" As soon as the voice fell, Kuroto's pure white left eye suddenly turned bright blue like stars. At the same time, an extremely strong repulsive force suddenly formed, like an invisible hand, suddenly repelling the Azura path. Boom! Under the strong repulsive force, the Azura path was directly smashed into the wall, and its body was torn apart. After the attack, Kuroto's left eye returned to pure white, and the chakra in her body seemed to be instantly sucked out. What just happened? Seeing that Kuroto's strong enemy was inexplicably killed by Kuroto just by shouting Hyojin's name, the few people in the passage were shocked, and they looked at Kuroto in confusion. Kuroto was also at a loss. She only vaguely remembered that a few days ago, Hyojin had cast a technique on her left eye. Chapter 489. At this time, Mute walked to the wreckage of the Azura realm. After a quick check, he said to everyone in the tunnel, "There's no chakra reaction anymore." Uchiha Izumi whispered, "Is it dead?" Red Beans struggled to stand up, held the wall, and staggered over, saying, "This should be just a human puppet of the Akatsuki leader." After confirming that the Azura path has been completely destroyed, they once again looked to Hyuga Yui, who was still lying on the ground. Mute asked doubtfully, "You, what happened just now?" Since the Azura path was using the light cannon, everyone's vision was blocked by the strong light from the light cannon. No one could see what had happened. You shook her head and said, "I don't know what happened." In fact, even you herself wasn't sure what happened just now. She only had a vague feeling that it might have something to do with the spell that Hyojin cast on her left eye a few days ago. However, the scene just now was too strange. She was supposed to be an invincible enemy, but she was defeated in an instant, so she didn't dare to say anything. At least before she talked to Hyojin in private, she didn't dare to say anything. Redbean looked around and muttered, "Is there someone else hiding nearby?" Mute also became alert. Could it be someone from Amitsukami? All of a sudden, Everyone in the passageway other than Kuroto became suspicious on the ground. When the Azura realm was instantly destroyed in the tunnel, Tendo, who was floating above Mai, and Hyojin on the ground sensed the change at the same time. Heaven's Will's cold gaze gradually slanted downwards, glancing in the direction of the shelter. Is it the leader of Amatsukami? Is he hiding in Mai's shelter? A doubt welled up in Nagato's mind. The destruction of the Azura realm was too sudden. There was no sign at all, and Nagato was distracted by controlling the 6 paths of pain at the same time. His main attention was focused on the heavenly Tao made from Yahiko's corpse. So when the chakra connection of the Azura realm was suddenly cut off, he could not determine what happened in the passage of the sanctuary for a while. Based on the information from the Azura realm, Duan Ling Tian seemed to be using the Shinra Tensei that he was most proficient in. But one thing he could be sure of was that Mai's 9 Tails Jinchuriki was hiding in the shelter. After pondering for a moment, the heavenly Tao extended its arm in the direction of the shelter on the other side. Cough, cough. While coughing lightly, Kuroto removed the iron sand curtain in front of him. He had already sensed that Yui had just used the transcription seal to seal the rain wheel in Yui's left eye. Ling should be in the shelter. Did something happen there too? As the iron sand curtain was removed, Hyojin's vision was in a mess. Damn it! Although he had expected it, seeing such a scene still made him very angry. There was no doubt that the small courtyard that his parents left him in a good location must have been destroyed. Jiraiya also got up from the ground and looked around with shock and anger on his face. At this moment, Hyojin and the others were in the area where Wu had invaded Mai. It was closer to the outer wall and at the edge of the village. So when the Shinra Tensei spread to this place, its power had weakened a lot. In addition, with the protection of Hyojin's iron sand curtain, the damage around the village was far less than the central area of the village. But even so, there were only a few buildings left standing around. It could be seen what the central area of Mai had become. This made Jiraiya, who loved Mai deeply, extremely angry. Nagato! Jiraiya shouted as he looked at the heavens Tao in the sky. He then charged forward without a care in the world. Tsunade, who climbed out of the ruins, did not rush to the Tendo like Jiraiya, but quickly printed with a heavy face and immediately pressed on the ground. Psychic Jutsu. In the loud shout of Tsunade, a white smoke rolled up. When the white smoke dissipated, a huge white-blue slug appeared in front of Tsunade. This is the psychic beast of Tsunade, one of the Sannin, the Shikatsu forest slug. Looking at the mess around, the slug was shocked. How did I become like this? Tsunade said in a deep voice. I will explain to you in detail later. It is more important to treat the injured first. Yes. At the command of Tsunade, the huge slug immediately split into countless small slugs and scattered throughout the ruins to treat the injured my ninjas. Although the villagers have entered the shelter in advance and escaped the disaster, there is still a large number of my ninjas on the ground, so the attack just now, the casualties of my ninjas must be not light. If they are not treated in time, it is likely to cause huge casualties. Hyojin didn't care about Tsunade. He jumped up and flew into the air. At the moment, the priority must be to get rid of Tendo. This guy is simply a human-shaped nuclear bomb. If he lets it go on like this, the entire my village will be directly wiped out. Outside my village, a majestic goshawk was searching around the periphery of my village. After a long time, it finally approached the cliff where Nagato's real body was. At this moment, the goshawk's sharp eyes flickered when it noticed 2 figures on the cliff. It closed its wings and dove toward the cliff at an extremely fast speed. It seemed like it wanted to get closer to confirm the identities of the figures on the cliff. At the spur of the moment, countless pieces of paper swarmed from all directions and stuck to the goshawk. Despite sensing the danger, the goshawk did not turn around to escape. Instead, it tightened its wings and dove toward the cliff. Hiss, hiss, as the detonation talismans were ignited, sparks appeared on the pieces of paper stuck to the goshawk's body. The goshawk turned a deaf ear to the dangerous situation that was right in front of it. It stared at the cliff with its sharp eyes, which was getting closer and closer. Boom, boom, boom. Soon enough, a series of explosions were heard in the sky, and the goshawk was directly devoured by the explosions. Nagato, who was standing at the edge of the cliff, only glanced at it briefly. Next to him, Conan retracted her right hand that was controlling the paper escape and said, "Hiriko has set up a special potion to drive away birds and beasts in the vicinity. That goshawk just now is not an ordinary bird. Our location has been exposed." Nagato said lightly, "Don't worry about it." In the underground base of the My Intelligence team, Kaichi Yamanaka suddenly opened his eyes, removed the device on his head, and said weakly, "Quick, inform Naruto-sama. I found the specific location of the target." After saying that, he suddenly realized that the underground base of the intelligence team was in a mess and all kinds of equipment were lying all over the place. At this time, one of the intelligence team's subordinates reported to him in panic, "We've lost contact with the Naruto building." Chapter 490. Lost contact. Kaichi Yamanaka was stunned for a long time. He couldn't react and subconsciously asked, "What does this mean?" The mind ninja of the intelligence team doesn't know much. He only knows that after the earthquake, all the communication between the intelligence team and the outside world was cut off. Even the Naruto building was no exception. Kaichi Yamanaka didn't feel the earthquake just now, because he has been using the secret technique of the Yamanaka clan, Heart Twist Jutsu, to send his consciousness into the body of an eagle to search for the traces of the Akatsuki organization's leader. At this time, a member of the intelligence team who went out to investigate stumbled back to the intelligence team's underground base and shouted, "Not good! The village! The village!" Kaichi Yamanaka anxiously asked, "What happened outside?" The member of the intelligence team knelt on the ground and said with a sad face, "The village is gone." Yamanaka Inoichi was also lost in thought for a while. Then his expression froze, and he stood up with a resolute expression. The intelligence team's underground base survived, which means that the Umbu's base, the Roots base, and the shelter were not directly destroyed. As the commander of the intelligence team, Kaichi Yamanaka knew that Lei Ing, Mizukage, Kazekage, and Tsuchikage, the four strongest ninjas of the shinobi world, were in the Root base, waiting for them to find the traces of the Akatsuki organization's leader Nagato. These four Kage and their bodyguards are a force that can't be underestimated. As long as they can kill the Akatsuki organization's leader, the situation can be instantly reversed. Soon, Kaichi Yamanaka arrived at the Root base. At this time, the Root base is also in chaos. The four Kage are arguing with each other about whether to attack or not. Lei Ing and Mizukage can't bear it anymore, while Tsuchikage and Kazekage want to collect more information before attacking. All of them are the leaders of the village, and no one is willing to submit to anyone. Coupled with the fact that Naruto is missing, they quarreled for a while without any result. However, this dispute calmed down after the arrival of Kaichi Yamanaka. With the location of the Akatsuki organization's leader Nagato found, everyone quickly reached a consensus. The threat of the Akatsuki organization is too great. Even I can't resist it, not to mention the other villages. So if they don't take advantage of the time when the four Kage are gathered to eliminate the Akatsuki organization, there may not be a chance in the future. At this time, Hamura stood up and said, "On behalf of I will attack with you." 3 generations lost, Mito Kazekage. Mito Yamanaka has no choice but to take the lead. A moment later, everyone quietly left the village through a secret passage in the original Root base and headed straight for the high cliff in the mountain that Hai-E had scouted before. In this group, in addition to the 4 Kages and Hamura, there are also many experts from the 5 great shinobi villages. The Mist village has Mei and Ayajirai. The Sand Crypsis has Chiyo and Hakura. The Cloud village has Hachibi's Jinchuriki. The Rock village has Inoki's son, and Akatsuki, who has the title of Tsuchikage's shield. A team of nearly 100 people, all composed of Jonin and elite Jonin. A powerful force that can control the situation of the shinobi world, my village. Rushing to the bottom of Tendo, Jiraiya shouted angrily, "Nagato!" Tendo, who was preparing to use ninjutsu on the shelter, lowered his hand and slowly fell to the ground. Looking at the completely changed village, Jiraiya, who was burning with anger, did not waste any time. He formed a hand seal and shouted at the heavens Tao, celestial method, 5 right guard gate. Boom! A huge sea of fire surged and rolled towards Tendo. Swoosh at this time, in the sound of wind breaking, a figure blocked in front of Tendo and opened his arms. The huge sea of fire seemed to have hit a reef and was split in half by the figure. In a shining brilliance, all the flames that rushed to the figure were absorbed. Little Jiraiya, that puppet seems to be able to absorb or seal our immortal arts. Immortal Fukasaku on Jiraiya's shoulder warned. Immortal Shima on the side said, "Fight him in close combat." Jiraiya immediately stepped on the sea of fire and rushed over with all his might, punching the figure in front of Tendo. Seeing Jiraiya in immortal mode rushing over, the figure flashed to the side, revealing Tendo behind him. At the same time, Tendo had already raised his arm and said indifferently, "Shinra Tensei." Boom! A huge repulsive force suddenly formed, pushing Jiraiya back along with the sea of fire. And at this moment, Immortal Shima on Jiraiya's shoulder stretched out his long and thin tongue. The tongue moved as fast as lightning and instantly wrapped around the figure that had absorbed the immortal art 5th right guard beside Tendo and pulled it over. After landing, the furious Jiraiya did not hesitate and punched the figure's head. Bang! In immortal mode, Jiraiya's strength was not inferior to Tsunade's by much. With a single punch and a dull sound, the figure's head was dented by him. Seeing that Jiraiya had destroyed his hungry ghost realm, Tendo actually smiled and said, "Teacher, you finally felt it." Without waiting for Jiraiya to answer, Tendo continued, "The village was ravaged by others, and in the face of a strong enemy, you can't do anything about it. If you don't experience it yourself, who can truly understand this kind of pain?" Jiraiya roared, "Don't tell me you don't have any remorse for doing these insane things." Tendo said coldly, "Teacher, I didn't expect your thoughts to be so arrogant." At this moment, Hyojin descended from the sky and rushed towards Tendo. Tendo snorted and stretched out his arm toward Hyojin. "Shinra Tensei!" Boom! The huge repulsive force sent Hyojin and the iron sand around him flying. Then, Tendo said, "You are no match for me. Let Yama show himself." Swish! Before Tendo finished speaking, Hyojin, who had just been sent flying by Shinra Tensei, appeared behind Tendo in a flash. So fast! Tendo was shocked and suddenly jumped to the side, narrowly avoiding the bone blade in Hyojin's hand. However, Hyojin, who had cut through Tendo's red cloud robe, curled his lips. Puff! Suddenly, Hyojin spat out a mouthful of blood. Tendo saw this and said, "Your body looks like it can't hold on for much longer." Hyojin smiled and said, "You don't understand what this means at all." To put it bluntly, the Type A clone's blood disease was a manifestation of its ability reverting to its ancestor. The more serious the blood disease was, the stronger the corpse bone meridian was. If the Type A clone was on the verge of collapse, it meant that the corpse bone meridian was getting closer and closer to the mutual killing gray bones. Chapter 491. Listening to Hyojin's confident tone, Tendo's indifferent face frowned. Originally, Nagato thought that the only person in Amatsukami that he needed to pay attention to was the leader of Amatsukami, Yama. Later, he heard that Obsidian was defeated by Homusubi of Amatsukami. Although he looked down on Obsidian's Manjikyu Sharingan, he knew that Obsidian's pupil technique is very special and extremely difficult to deal with. An ordinary person wouldn't be able to hurt Obsidian at all. Therefore, Kuroto started to pay attention to Homusubi of Amatsukami. But who would have thought that this nameless member of Amatsukami, who wore a mask with the symbol of a gale, would be so difficult to deal with? Not only did he defeat Hiriko, who had 5 different Kekkei limits, he even nearly injured Tendo. This was something that Nagato would never allow. He has the strength to threaten me. After coming to this conclusion, Tendo's eyes narrowed, and his originally indifferent eyes became solemn as he said, "Tell me your name." Hyojin chuckled and said, "Amitsukami, Kamikaze." Kamikaze. Nagato pondered for a moment, but he didn't have the slightest impression of Kamikaze. Thanks to Zetsu's special ability, Akatsuki's infiltration of the major shinobi villages has been very smooth in recent years, and they have more or less understanding of the strongest shinobi in the shinobi world. However, even after searching through his memories, Nagato couldn't find any strong shinobi who had both Kekii Limit and Kekii Limit. This Kamikaze of Amitsukami seems to have appeared out of thin air, or rather, Amitsukami itself seems to have appeared out of thin air, and there is no trace of them in the shinobi world. At this time, Jiraiya seemed to have made up his mind and said in a deep voice, "Nagato, as your sensei, I can't allow you to do such evil anymore. I must stop you today." Tendo shifted his gaze to Jiraiya and said lightly, "Sensei, do you want to kill me?" Jiraiya said solemnly, "If you refuse to repent, I can only do this." "Repent?" The will of the heavens grinned disdainfully and said, "Why is it righteous for you to destroy the Hidden Rain village, but I need to repent for destroying my? Why is it always us small shinobi villages who need to repent?" Jiraiya said helplessly, "Nagato, you have been blinded by hatred." "No." Shaking his head, Heavens will said coldly, "I've just come to a realization. Yahiko used his life to warn me that dialogue can't be exchanged for peace. Power is the foundation of peace. Only when everyone has experienced the pain that I have endured will they understand the value of peace. So I want the world to feel pain." Jiraiya didn't expect Nagato to be so extreme that he even tried to maintain peace in the ninja world with fear and pain. This was simply going from one extreme to the other. So he said sadly, "Is the peace obtained in this way still real peace? Living in fear, without laughter, without freedom, what's the difference between such peace and a prison?" Heavens will recalled memories of his childhood and said, "It's better than dying inexplicably at home, dying on the roadside, dying quietly in the wilderness. Laughter? Freedom? What's the point of those things if I can't even guarantee my survival?" Jiraiya shouted, "That's why we should work harder to change the ninja world. You have the legendary immortal's eye, and it's very likely that you are the child of prophecy who will bring change to the ninja world. Don't make the same mistake again." Before Jiraiya finished speaking, Tendo stretched out his arm towards him and said, "Shinra Tensei." Boom! Under the huge repulsive force, Jiraiya was instantly blasted away. At this time, Tendo said faintly, "Sensei, it seems like you still can't understand my pain." Hyojin didn't have the energy to distinguish who was right and who was wrong. As the blood secondary disease continued to worsen, his wind-release Type A clone body was reaching its limit. His joints were like rusty machines. With a slight movement, there would be a slight creaking sound and all the muscles in his body would either feel sore or convulse. Without a doubt, this wind-release Type A clone body's mutual killer gray bones characteristic was becoming more and more obvious. The first to bear the brunt was the Type A wind escape clone. The common kill gray bones characteristic in its blood was slowly disintegrating the body's functions. "Ouch, it really hurts." Hyojin was sweating profusely. If it wasn't for the mask on his face, he might not have been able to maintain his composure. Enduring the various discomfort in his body, he looked at Nagato and analyzed the situation in front of him. The 6 paths of pain were all human puppets made from corpses. As long as Nagato, who had the Rinnegan eye, didn't die, these human puppets could be constantly replaced. Therefore, killing them was meaningless. However, the Tendo in front of him was slightly different. This was because it was made from the corpse of Nagato's best friend, Yahiko. To Nagato, it had a unique and special meaning. Therefore, Nagato would not give up on the Tendo. Therefore, Hyojin could use this Tendo to do something. Soon, Hyojin had an idea. He shouted to Jiraiya, who had just been repelled by Shinra Tensei, "Stop talking nonsense with him. Even if you want to communicate with him, At least defeat him first. Jiraiya also realized that if he didn't defeat Nagato first, any kind of persuasion would be meaningless. Therefore, he didn't say anything else. He jumped up from the ground and quickly made a hand seal. At this moment, the Tendo stretched out its arms toward Jiraiya and Hyojin and coldly shouted, "Earth exploding heavenly star!" In an instant, Hyojin and Jiraiya were pulled up by a strong gravitational force. Their bodies instantly became weightless and floated in the air. At the same time, the soil and gravel around them also rose into the air. Jiraiya was shocked. He shouted to Hyojin, "Find a way to get out. If you get sucked in, it's over." Jiraiya had a lingering fear of the Earth exploding heavenly star. The last time he raided the Hidden Rain village, he was instantly subdued by Nagato with this move. If it wasn't for Jishuei activating Susanoo and risking her life to save him, he and Hachibi's Jinchuriki would probably be sealed in the Earth exploding heavenly star. This was the first time Hyojin was hit by the Earth exploding heavenly star. However, his expression didn't change. The Byakugan under the mask searched around and soon locked on the inconspicuous black ball in the night above him. The glowing black ball was the core of the Earth exploding heavenly star. At this time, Jiraiya suddenly shouted, "What's going on?" The attraction this time is stronger than the last time. Chapter 492. After transplanting the Hashirama cells, Nagato could be considered to have completed his sage body. In terms of physique alone, he was infinitely close to Otsutsuki Ajura, the son of the sage of the Six Paths. And with the fusion of the bodies of the Thousand Hands clan and the Uzumaki clan, not only did he recover from the disability caused by Hyojin's Golden Wheel reincarnation explosion, but his chakra's amount had also improved. If the previous Nagato used a large-scale Shinra Tensei and Kibaka Tensei at the cost of his own life. But now, using these ninjutsu is just a little more taxing. If you don't count the consumption of the Rinnegan's pupil power, the large-scale Shinra Tensei, and the powerful techniques of the Rinnegan, such as Earth Explosion Tensei, can almost be regarded as ordinary ninjutsu for him. Because of this, Jiraiya suddenly discovered that the Kibaku Tensei that Nagato used this time was completely different from the one in the Hidden Rain village. The absorption power was not comparable at all. Even if he had done some escape training in private, it was completely useless at this time. Damn it! Watching his body being buried by countless soil and gravel, Jiraiya roared unwillingly. Like Jiraiya, Hyojin's body gradually disappeared in the soil, but he didn't struggle much. He was unusually calm and seemed to be brewing something. On the ground, looking up at the huge sphere that was gradually forming in the sky, and Hyojin and Jiraiya were gradually disappearing in the soil and gravel. Tendo's indifferent face didn't change at all, as if everything was natural. Perhaps Nagato didn't know that the Kibaka Tensei was the move that the Otsutsuki Yuki brothers used to seal his mother, Kagaya, but he knew that no one could escape from the Kibaka Tensei without external help. So the moment the giant sphere was completed, Camera and Jiraiya were no longer a threat. At this time, Tendo's eyes moved to an area in the distance. There, dozens of meters underground, was none other than Mai's refuge. This time, to punish Mai, capturing the Nine Tails' Jinchuriki was also one of Akatsuki's goals. Since he found that Konoha's Kyuubi's Jinchuriki was hiding in the sanctuary, Nagato naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity, and because he suspected that the leader of Amatsukami, Yama, was also hiding in the sanctuary, Nagato didn't plan to let Tendo attack the sanctuary himself because it was too dangerous. Tendo stretched out his arm in the direction of the refuge and said again, "Kibaku Tensei." Boom! Before Tendo could launch his ninjutsu, the giant sphere created by the Kibaku Tensei behind him that imprisoned Hyojin and Jiraiya suddenly exploded with a dull sound. Tendo turned his head and looked over. Clatter, with a series of tremors, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the giant sphere created by the Kibaku Tensei, and gravel kept falling from the surface of the sphere. Obviously, the giant sphere created by the Kibaku Tensei and the air was collapsing. How is this possible? Tendo's indifferent face finally changed, revealing a look of disbelief. In the absence of external attacks, in Nagato's knowledge, this situation was impossible to happen. No one could escape the imprisonment of the Kabaka Tensei without external help. Boom! There was another loud sound, and the giant sphere that was already full of cracks instantly burst like fireworks in the night sky. Looking at the dust and gravel flying in all directions, Tendo frowned, and his face was solemn. Swoosh! Under the cover of the countless flying gravel, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Tendo. Windchime! After recognizing the other party's identity, Heaven's Tao retreated without any hesitation. You can't run away. Hyojin chuckled and chased after him. Bang, bang, bang. In the blink of an eye, the two figures were fighting. Their fists and legs clashed, and there was a dull sound that shook the eardrums. Tendo could not only use all kinds of powerful Rinnegan techniques, but his body technique was also very strong. In the original space and time, Tendo used his body technique to fight against the Nine Tails Jinchuriki Naruto in a berserk state, and the speed and strength he displayed were the best in the ninja world. As for Hyojin's type A wind release clone, because it was on the verge of collapse, its speed and strength were reduced to different degrees. Although it still had the upper hand, it could not take down Tendo in a hurry. At this moment, Hyojin seemed to have gone all out and shouted, "Dance of the early fern!" Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh! Bone spears rose from the ground again, and a pale white bone forest instantly appeared on the messy ground. With the convenience of moving through the bone forest, Hyojin went behind Tendo and slashed down with the bone blade in his hand. The moment the bone forest appeared, Nagato lost his sense of Hyojin and fell into a passive state. However, his premonition of danger did not disappear. When Hyojin went behind Tendo and launched a surprise attack, he did not hesitate to chakra and cast the strengthened version of Shinra Tensei again. Boom, a huge impact wave swept again, but this time Nagato cast it too hastily, and the power was not even half of what it was before. Even so, it was enough to destroy the bone forest around him. Huff! Huff! Tendo, who was standing in place, panted heavily. Casting the strengthened version of Shinra Tensei twice in a short period of time was a big burden for him, who had improved his physique. Especially the last time, it was too rushed and he was completely unprepared, so the consumption was even greater. However, looking at the broken bone spears in front of him, Nagato felt that the consumption was worth it. Crack! With a slight sound, a crack suddenly appeared on the ground under Tendo's feet. Tendo's expression froze, and he was about to dodge. But at this moment, a figure broke out of the ground, and the bone blade in his hand with a cold light slashed at Tendo. If he was hit by this attack, Tendo would definitely be split in half, but at this time, there was no way for him to dodge, and Shinra Tensei was also in cooldown. Seeing the bone blade getting closer and closer, Tendo's face finally showed a horrified expression. Nagato did not care about the 6 paths of pain, but he cared about Yahiko's corpse. Suddenly, a twisting vortex appeared behind Heaven's Will, sucking in Heaven's Will, who had nowhere to run. Seeing Tendo being sucked in by the twisted whirlpool, Hyojin, who was attacking Tendo, was not surprised. Instead, he breathed a sigh of relief and said to himself, "Finally caught you." Chapter 493. Thud. Behind a broken wall that was more than 300 meters away from the battlefield where Hyojin and Tiandao fought, the ground cracked, and a figure shot out from the ground. That figure was none other than Hyojin. Previously, Tiandao had only destroyed the bone spears on the surface with Shinra Tensei. There was still a dense forest of bone spears underground, and the one who was attacking Tiandao in the distance was just one of Hyojin's bone clones. His real body had been hiding underground in the bone forest, and he was waiting for the moment Obsidian attacked. Even if he gathered 2 divine powers and could activate his ocular technique from a distance without needing to touch Obsidian, when he activated it, he had to get out of his illusory state and enter a corporeal state where he could be attacked. and that moment was the only chance Hyojin had to attack. Under the broken wall, when Obsidian heard the sound of the ground breaking, he could not help but be slightly shocked while he used his ocular technique to save Tiandao in the distance. Then, his lips curled up, and he put on the ghost of a smile. "Oh, so you're coming for me." Obsidian, who was skilled in ambushes, had already realized that wind chimes from God's organization had only attacked Tiandao as a cover. Her real target was him, but he did not mind it. In fact, he was a little disdainful. However, when Hyojin broke out of the ground, he did not say a single word. He held the bone blade in his hand, and without any hesitation, he swung it down fiercely at Obsidian. It would not be too late to say anything else after he succeeded. At that moment, what he needed to do was to use all his strength to kill his target. If it was possible, he even hoped that Obsidian would die in a daze. There is no doubt that from the start to the end, Hyojin's target was not Tiandao. Yahiko's body may be very important to Nagato, but it is meaningless to Kuroto. Destroying it is completely harmful to others without benefiting himself, and it is not worth Kuroto to risk his life for it. Hyojin's real target was Obsidian, who had been wandering around the battlefield. That's right. Based on his understanding of Obsidian, he believed that Obsidian had not retreated. Instead, he had borrowed the power of divine aura to roam around the battlefield, looking for a suitable opportunity to strike. With such a specter spying on them, even Hyojin, who was controlling the Type A wind escape clone, felt uneasy. It could be said that apart from Hyojin, who had the ability to slightly counter the Obsidian, the rest of Mai, including Jiraiya, who was in immortal mode, and the missing 3 generations, could not resist the Obsidian's plot. So, he had to get rid of Obsidian first, and he had to do it without delay. But if he wanted to get rid of Obsidian, he had to lure him out of the state of divine aura. Looking at the entire battlefield, the only thing that could possibly lure Obsidian to attack was Tiandao. Because if Obsidian watched Tiandao be destroyed by Hyojin, it would inevitably ignite the conflict between him, Nagato, and Konami. Don't underestimate Nagato and Konami's feelings for Yahiko. If Obsidian did not help, there was a real possibility that Nagato would turn against him. At that time, the Akatsuki might have internal strife or split. And for Obsidian, this was something that he absolutely could not allow. So, as he understood the bond between Yahiko, Nagato, and Konami, he couldn't just watch Hyojin destroy Tiandao. Plus, after retrieving his left eye, not only could he use Kamui from a distance, but he also had Susanoo. With his confidence skyrocketing, his vigilance naturally decreased. All of Hyojin's previous actions were carried out around this plan. When he was attacked by Chibaku Tensei, he did not struggle violently, nor did he attack the core black ball of Chibaku Tensei in advance. This was to make Nagato and Obsidian lower their guard, making them misjudge and underestimate him. For this reason, he didn't even hesitate to risk being imprisoned by Chibaku Tensei. Fortunately, the bone blade that contained the characteristic of mutual kill gray bones did not disappoint him. It successfully destroyed the core black ball of Nagato's Chibaku Tensei and escaped in a situation that Nagato and Obsidian didn't expect at all. It launched a swift and violent attack, causing Nagato and Obsidian to fight hastily, without any time to think and weigh the pros and cons. Without time to think, one would follow their instincts. If one couldn't calmly weigh the pros and cons, one might make a mistake. Hyojin was betting on this 1 or 2 seconds, betting on Obsidian's carelessness and making a mistake. At this time, in front of the will of the heavens and behind Obito, there was a bone blade that was about to slash down. The bone blade glowed with a dim light, and in the darkness of a night, it was inconspicuous. How to choose was placed in front of Obsidian. However, in the face of the sudden sneak attack from behind, Obsidian did not choose to pause the pupil technique and enter the state of nothingness, because in that case, Tiandao in the distance would be split into 2 by Hyojin's bone clone. So he didn't stop the pupil technique, but he also didn't intend to sacrifice himself. In the face of the sneak attack from behind, the corner of his mouth raised, and his face was full of sarcasm. In an instant, An emerald blue phantom was projected from his body. Roar, accompanied by the roar of the phantom. An emerald blue Susanoo was completed in an instant, blocking between Obsidian and Hyojin. Although Obsidian's Manjikyu Sharingan is not the Eternal Eyes Manjikyu Sharingan, but after transplanting the Hashirama cells, the pupil power of Manjikyu Sharingan is infinitely close to the Eternal Eyes, and instantly activating Susanoo is a piece of cake for him. Humph, do you think you can hurt me? Obsidian, who activated Susanoo, didn't even look back, just looked behind him with the corner of his eyes. Now in his eyes, ninjas without the bloodline of the Sage of the Six Paths are all ants. No matter how strong this Amatsukumi's wind chime is just an ant that is slightly more difficult to deal with. After recovering the Manjikyu Sharingan in his left eye, he has the qualification to activate Susanoo, and he has made up for his shortcomings in direct confrontation. There is no weakness. Kacha, a harsh, crisp sound resounded through the night sky. For some reason, when he heard the crisp sound coming from behind him, a bad premonition welled up in the depths of his heart. He quickly turned around, wanting to see what was happening behind him. But before he turned his head, the corner of his eyes caught a glimpse of a scene that surprised him. The bone blade held by Hyojin, who jumped high behind him, cut the Susanoo, but it was like cutting thin glass. The body of Susanoo, which is formed by the fusion of the pupil power of Manjikyu Sharingan and the high-intensity chakra, was shattered without the slightest resistance. Not only that, after coming into contact with the bone blade, the emerald blue Susanoo's body quickly fell into decay and disintegration, like a withered branch or a withered leaf. How is this possible? Obsidian, who hadn't completely turned his head, suddenly shrank his pupils, and then he vaguely felt that his body seemed to be cut in half. Chapter 494. Whoosh! A gust of night wind blew past, stirring up a cloud of dust. The earth was shaking, the sky was collapsing, and the battlefield suddenly became silent. Only the wails of the injured Konoha ninjas echoed faintly in the distance. Hyojin's sudden attack to kill Obsidian and Obsidian's pupil sorcery were completed almost at the same time. Therefore, the two important enemies on the battlefield were suddenly gone. Jiraiya, who had just escaped from the earth-shattering heavenly star and suffered a head-on Shinra Tensei, crawled out of the mound and looked around with a dusty face at a loss. Hyojin, on the other hand, stared at Obsidian's body. At this time, Obsidian's body, which had been broken in half, also fell into a rapid decay like his Susanoo before, as if it had experienced several months of corrosion in an instant, turning into a pile of rotten flesh. Did it work? A sense of expectation rose in Kuroto's heart. His sudden attack just now was very sudden, and the bone blade that contained the characteristics of the murderous gray bones cut Obsidian's Susanoo in one go without any hindrance. So perhaps Obsidian did not have time to use the forbidden technique of Izanagi that could change fate. Puff! At this time, Hyojin could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Then his body shook, and he staggered a few steps before he could barely stabilize his body. Activating the dance of the early fern for a long period of time and maintaining a large area of the bone forest is already a heavy burden, not to mention that Kuroto is still suffering from the blood disease. If it weren't for the fact that the Type A wind-release clone body is strong enough and has excellent physique, he wouldn't have been able to hold on for so long. But even so, he can only hold on for 10 more minutes at most. In the blink of an eye, Hyojin suddenly found that Obsidian's body on the ground had disappeared, and even if he activated the Byakugan, he could not find a trace of it. Even if it was hit by Kagaya's murderous gray bones, the corpse would only leave a pile of ashes, and there was no trace left. There was only one possibility. Obsidian used the Fate Distortion Izanagi before he died. I was still a step too slow. Kuroto sighed inwardly, but he wasn't too disappointed. Being able to force Obsidian to use Izanagi was already a strategic success. It was almost impossible to kill Obsidian before he could even use Izanagi. So, Hyojin's original plan was to only use one of Obsidian's Manjikyu Sharingan. Although the fate distortion forbidden technique, Izanagi, is powerful, it is not without a price. Every time it is used, it needs to completely consume the pupil power of one Sharingan, and this consumption can be said to be permanent. Except for Madara Uchiha, who evolved his eternal Manjikyu Sharingan into Rinnegan and replenished the pupil power through the evolution of the eyes, the consumed pupil power cannot be replenished. In other words, Obsidian must lose one Sharingan. Converging the fluctuating mood, Hyojin observed the surroundings, ready to launch another attack at the moment when Obsidian resurrects. Without one Manjikyu Sharingan, whether it is the left eye or the right eye, Obsidian's strength will be greatly reduced. As long as the place where Obsidian resurrects is close enough to Hyojin, then Hyojin will have a chance to kill him again. At that time, even if Obsidian used Izanagi again, he would be no different from a waste without two Sharingan. Swish, at this time, a group of figures gathered towards this side of the battlefield. The first to arrive was Kakashi and his special tactics squad. Then, several members of the 7th squad of Hyojin Umbu also arrived on the battlefield one after another, and then a large number of my ninjas came from all directions to support. Most of these my ninjas had a small slug on their shoulders. Although they looked very embarrassed, they seemed to be in good spirits. Obviously, they had been treated. Looking around and seeing no trace of the enemy, Kakashi quickly asked Jiraiya in the field, "Jiraiya, Sama, where's the enemy?" Jiraiya shook his head. He didn't see the scene of Hyojin repelling Tendo and killing Obsidian just now, so he was confused at the moment. He didn't know what happened, but Tendo disappeared. Red didn't stop and flew straight to Hyojin's position. At this time, Hyojin waved to Red, "Don't come over." Red was stunned for a moment, but she still stopped obediently and looked at Hyojin with a puzzled face from distance. Listening to Hyojin's unusually serious tone, a group of my ninjas were puzzled. They were very surprised that there was no enemy around. Why Hyojin still put on a posture as if he was facing a great enemy. Only a few people, such as Jiraiya and Kakashi, realized something and warned their companions around them while being on guard. At this moment, Obsidian's figure appeared out of thin air on an open space on the battlefield. There was no twisting vortex, no illusory figure. His appearance was like a god creating something out of thin air, replacing nothingness into reality in an instant. "Izanagi," Hyojin said silently, but did not take any action. The place where Obsidian resurrected was hundreds of meters away from him. With his current physical condition, it was difficult to complete the attack before Obsidian illusory himself. Everyone be careful. How did he appear? Is it space-time ninjutsu? The sudden appearance of Obsidian caused a commotion among my ninjas around. Kakashi clenched the special kunai in his hand and stared at the figure of Obsidian in the distance. He could not forget this figure. It was this figure that took away the Sharingan in his left eye. Could it be him? Kakashi was now eager to confirm the identity of Obsidian. He wanted to know if this guy wearing the Vortex mask was his former best friend. Obsidian's eyes were locked on Hyojin. This is the second time. He was very gloomy and angry at this time. This was the second time he was forced to use Izanagi by the members of Amatsukami, which meant that Amatsukami had tried to kill him twice. His face was burning hot. At the same time, he was also afraid of Kamikaze. He couldn't understand why Kamikaze's bone blade could cut through his Susanoo so easily. It didn't make any sense. On the outer wall of the village, Jishuei and Itachi, who had rushed back to the village, jumped onto the outer wall and saw the scene in the village. They were stunned. The village is destroyed. How could this be? How is this possible? This is my... Chapter 495. The scene in front of the two Uchiha couldn't believe it. The head of the 5 great shinobi villages suffered such serious damage in a relatively peaceful period. This has never happened even during the bloody and cruel war. I didn't expect that the village that has experienced 3 great shinobi wars would be destroyed in such an ordinary night. Until now, Jishui was still full of doubts. He even wondered if he was still in some kind of genjutsu. Itachi's face was even gloomier than Jishui's. The village suffered such a catastrophe. He didn't dare to imagine the situation of his family at this time, because once he imagined it, countless terrible scenes would emerge in his mind. Suddenly, in the ruins of the village in the distance, a dazzling emerald blue light flashed. Roar! Immediately afterward, a roar of Susanoo resounded through the night sky. Looking at the huge emerald blue soon in the distance, Jishui's eyes narrowed. "It's a Susanoo," Itachi gently nodded. "Well, a Susanoo that I have never seen before." Jishui and Shinichi's Susanoo are both green. One is emerald green, the other is dark green. Itachi's is fiery red, and Uchiha's Susanoo, that is Hyugin's fire-release doppelgangers, is golden. The emerald blue in the distance, Jishui and Itachi have never seen or heard of it. Therefore, the Susanoo is either Itachi's father, Fuyue's, or the mysterious Uchiha clansman who has Manjikyu Sharingan in the Akatsuki organization. In contrast, the two of them are more inclined to believe that the Susanoo belongs to the enemy, because at this moment, the Susanoo has wings on its back and is flying in the air. As the possessors of Manjikyu Sharingan, Jishui and Itachi are very clear that the Susanoo awakened by the ordinary Manjikyu Sharingan is not the perfect form, nor does it have the ability to fly. Only the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, or like the current Jishui, after transplanting the Hashirama cells, the Susanoo awakened is the perfect form or close to the perfect form. In an instant, the two Uchiha on the outer wall activated their Manjikyu Sharingan at the same time, and a cold, killing intent spread from their bodies. Boom! Suddenly, a loud explosion came from the forest behind them. Then, a conspicuous pillar of light appeared in the dark night sky. Turning around, Jishui frowned. "Is that dust release?" In the Third Shinobi World War, Jishui fought in the front line of Mai against the mist, so he didn't see dust release, the famous Kekiai Genkai in the shinobi world. But this doesn't prevent him from recognizing dust release at a glance, because dust release is too conspicuous and too easy to recognize. Itachi whispered, "Is it the 5 Kage?" As a member of Amatsukami, Itachi and Jishui are also aware that the 3 generations secretly convened the 5 Kage meeting in the village. So when Itachi found dust release, he immediately judged the situation there. Boom! 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 The pillar of light disappeared in a flash. And then there was a continuous explosion. The sound of the explosion quickly spread around. The fire was accompanied by rolling smoke. Everything around was reflected in the light, as if hell had come to the world. Such a fierce battle is not something that can be caused by ordinary ninjas. Coupled with the dust release that just appeared, Shursui and Itachi instantly judged that one side of the battle is likely to be the 5 Kages. And the only one who can fight against the 5 Kages, or in other words, the only one worthy of the 5 Kages fighting together, is the leader of Akatsuki, who has the Rinnegan. One battlefield is in the village, and the other is outside the village. And the battle in the forest outside the village is obviously more intense than the battle in the village. So where to support first suddenly became a problem in front of Jishui and Itachi. At this time, Jishui patted Itachi on the shoulder and said, "I will support the battlefield in the forest. You are in charge of the village." The battlefield in the forest is obviously more dangerous. So Jishui left the relatively safe battlefield to Itachi, and Jishui also understands that Itachi must be worried about his relatives in the village at this time. Itachi knows that Jishui is taking care of him, but he really cares about the safety of his parents and brother, so he didn't refuse and nodded heavily. Okay. On the battlefield in the center of the village, looking at Obsidian, who once again activated Susanoo and flew into the air, Hyugen sighed faintly. Damn it, he still has other Sharingan transplanted on his body. The fact that Obsidian can activate Tenseigan only shows one thing, that is, what Izanagi consumed just now was not his 2 Manjikyu Sharingan, but the other Sharingan on his body. Because even if a single Manjikyu Sharingan can be used to activate Susanoo, it is impossible to activate Susanoo, which is close to the complete form. In the previous sneak attack, although Hyojin has been maintaining the Byakugan. But in order to ensure insight into Obsidian's every move, his Byakugan's vision has been locked on the flow of chakra in Obsidian's body. And in the state of deep penetration, from the start to the end of the attack, he didn't have enough time to use the Byakugan to carefully observe the whole body of Obsidian. As a result, he didn't notice in advance that Obsidian has other Sharingan transplanted on his body. TSK, I didn't expect this guy to be so cautious. Is it because I killed him once before? Hyojin snorted. If he was Obsidian, he would probably make the same choice as Obsidian. After all, Obsidian's body has already fused with the first-generation cells, and transplanting a few more Sharingan is not a burden at all for Obsidian as an Uchiha clansman. He doesn't need to carefully seal the transplanted Sharingan like Danzo to maintain the balance of the chakra in his body. And as someone who inherited Uchiha Madara's legacy, the one thing that Obito doesn't lack the most is the Samagatama Sharingan. When Uchiha Madara left, he took away all the Sharingan collected by the Uchiha clan since the founding of the village. At this time, the ordinary Sharingan stored in the hands of Obsidian is probably no less than the Sharingan in the eye sockets of the Uchiha clan. And every transplanted Sharingan that can activate Izanagi is equivalent to an extra life. Such a temptation, as long as the conditions allow, no one will refuse. Hyojin's eyes gradually converged, and he said, "Sure enough, I can only seal it. Caw-caw." At this moment, a crow's cry sounded on the battlefield. The people in the fierce battle didn't care about this inconspicuous crow's cry, but Hyojin looked at the black crow that was mixed in the night sky. And at the moment when he looked at the black crow revealed scarlet eyes, and a chakra attacked him. Hyojin immediately reacted, and the corner of his mouth raised. He did not resist the attack of the chakra, and was instantly dragged into the illusion. Chapter 496. The attention of the Konoha ninjas who were in the middle of the fierce battle was completely focused on the Obito in the air. Only Kurenai, who has been secretly paying attention to Suijin, noticed that Suijin suddenly looked at the night sky and was startled for a moment, but immediately recovered. What did he see? Following Hyojin's gaze, Kurenai looked over in confusion, but only saw a black crow gradually flying away in the dark night sky. A bird. Withdrawing her gaze, Kurenai immediately leaned towards Hyojin and asked in a familiar tone, "Hey, what should we do now?" Obsidian, who had activated Susanoo, was simply unstoppable at the moment. Ordinary my ninjas couldn't hurt him at all, and even Jiraiya, one of the Sannin, could barely threaten him. And every attack of Obsidian could almost easily reap a life. In such a short time, there were already more than a dozen my ninjas who died tragically in the hands of Obsidian, many of which were killed by Obsidian's Susanoo Shuriken. Their deaths were extremely tragic, and not even a whole body was left behind. The Shuriken of the Obito Susanoo came with the effect of the pupil technique Shuriken, which was capable of removing all targets it came into contact with out of the original space-time dimension, breaking away from the level of physical attacks and becoming a space-time attack. In the original space-time dimension, even Kagaya, who had the bloodline net, was unable to resist Kakashi's Shuriken of the Shuriken. Seeing Hyojin was silent, Kurenai said anxiously, "Say something." Seeing my ninjas die tragically in the hands of Obsidian, Kurenai was very anxious. She knew that the only one who could threaten Obsidian at the moment was probably Kimui of Amatsukami. Hyojin shook his head and said calmly, "Ordinary means can't kill him at all. I have tried twice. The pupil technique Kimui of Manjikyu Sharingan and the forbidden technique Izanagi of Uchiha. As long as Obsidian doesn't make any mistakes, no one can kill him. Even if Uchiha Madara did something to Obsidian's heart, it was actually ridiculous, and it couldn't restrain Obsidian at all. It can be said that as long as Obsidian is careful enough, almost no one in the ninja world can kill him." Kuroto tried twice, and each time he almost did his best, but he still failed to succeed. Kurenai looked at Hyojin in surprise. "Are you going to let him slaughter our my ninjas?" "Puff," When Hyojin was about to speak, he suddenly spat out another mouthful of blood, and his body trembled slightly. Kurenai quickly held Hyojin and asked with concern, "Are you okay? Is it the same injury as before?" Hyojin waved his hand and said weakly and plainly, "It's dangerous here. You and your colleagues don't stay here. Take advantage of it and leave now." Hyojin didn't want to be distracted in the final decisive battle, so he wanted to drive away his team, 7 in advance, so that his subordinates would not suffer unnecessary losses. "I won't go." Kurenai's bright eyes stared at Hyojin. She didn't know why, but Kamui was still calm and indifferent even though he was seriously injured, which made her extremely fascinated. She couldn't tell whether this was the natural worship of the weak for the strong, or the gratitude of the recipient for the benefactor, or some unspeakable feelings. Hyojin didn't bother to persuade her. He had to focus to deal with the situation in front of him. His body on the verge of collapse had made him unable to think about other things. Boom! There was another roar, and countless kunai wrapped in detonation talismans shot at Obsidian in the air, and the explosion caused a burst of smoke and dust. However, when the smoke and dust dissipated, Obsidian's emerald blue siso appeared in everyone's sight intact. "Damn it, we can't win at all. He's a devil." With the increasing number of casualties and the useless siege, the spirit of the mine ninjas around was rapidly being consumed, and pessimism gradually accumulated. At this time, an older mine ninja stood up and shouted, "Don't be afraid. We will exhaust him to death, even if we have to." The casualties in front of him didn't scare the mine ninja, who had experienced the Third Shinobi World War. There were many strong people in the shinobi world who could destroy the army by themselves, not to mention far away, but in the Third Shinobi World War alone, there were strong people like Naruto 4 generations and Laying 3 generations who could contain an entire army by themselves. But in the face of a continuous siege, even the strong 4 generations Naruto had to retreat temporarily, and the reckless 3 generations Laying would also die of exhaustion. Listening to the shout of the mine ninja, Obsidian in the air sneered. Besieging others may work, but for him, besieging is meaningless because with the divine might, he can choose the location and time of the battle at any time. No one can do anything to him. After looking at Kakashi, who was gasping for breath for a moment, Obsidian moved his sight to Amatsukumi's Kaze in the distance. Among the people present, the only one that he was afraid of was Kaze. Through the battle with the mine ninjas just now, Obsidian confirmed that there was no problem with his Susanu's defense, which means that the Susanoo was instantly broken just now because Amatsukumi's Kaze has mastered a very powerful attack method that can ignore the defense of the Susanoo. Although this kind of thing is unheard of, but after suffering 2 losses from Amatsukumi, Obsidian secretly swore, "There will never be a third time, never." At this time, Hyojin vomited blood again, which was seen by Obsidian. With the insight of his Manjiki Sharingan, he can naturally distinguish that Kaze's frequent vomiting of blood is not an act, but a very serious problem with his body. The opportunity for revenge is right in front of him. Obsidian pondered for a moment and decided to take a risk. Because he has a total of 2 3-Tomo Sharingan transplanted on his back. One was consumed before, and now there is 1 left, which is enough for him to use his Anaji again. Looking at Obsidian's eyes locked on him, Hyojin guessed Obsidian's thoughts, so with a slight shake of his right hand, a bone blade protruding from his palm was caught in his hand. The bone blade in his hand has obviously changed at this time. Previously, the bone blade was as pale as an ordinary bone. It was so sharp that it glowed with a dim light. Now, however, it was a dull gray color. Its color was much deeper, and it didn't feel as sharp as before. It looked even more inconspicuous, as if it could break at any time. Red, who was beside him, keenly noticed the change in the bone blade in Hyojin's hand, and was shocked. Oh no, it must be because his injury is too heavy that even the bone blade has become weak. Chapter 497. Huff, huff. The masked man rode the blue Susanoo and came down from the sky. The two huge shurikens were held in his hands, ready to be fired. Under the vortex mask, Obsidian had a solemn look on his face, and the man GQ Sharingan in his eye sockets slowly rotated, capturing every move of Hyojin on the ground. At this time, Hyojin suddenly pushed Kurenai on the side. Bang! Kurenai, who was caught off guard, flew out with a muffled sound and fell into a pit in the distance. Immediately, Hyojin's eyes gradually focused and locked on Obsidian in the air. Under the wind mask, the blue veins near the temples on both sides of his eye sockets bulged, and the high-purity Byakugan was pushed to the extreme. Both sides were using pupil jutsu to capture each other's movements and predict each other's attack methods. It was just like when they sparred in the ninja school, but at that time they were all childish. One was not familiar with the use of the Byakugan, and the other didn't even open the Sharingan, but now they're strong enough to control the future of the shinobi world. At this moment, their eyes met. How long can your body hold on? Can you still be as fast as before? How much chakra do you have left to squander? Humph, do you still have a chance of winning? Obsidian sneered in his heart. He knew very well that Hikari has been involved in the battle since Satoshi invaded Mai. Hikari, Hiriko, Nagato's Tendo, and many other strong enemies repeatedly used the large-scale magnetic release ninjutsu, as well as the high-level secret technique dance of the early Fern. Even if Hikari is as talented as dried persimmon demon mermaid and has an abundant amount of chakras amount, at this time, it should have been exhausted. I have to break the Susanoo to ensure that it is foolproof. After a pause, Hyojin secretly said, Obsidian, will you still make a mistake? Will you give me another chance? Hyojin was very clear-headed. He knew that whether he could succeed or not did not depend entirely on himself. It mainly depended on whether Obsidian would make a mistake or not. As long as Obsidian did not make a mistake, he would not have the slightest chance. Swish, swish. At this moment, Obsidian controlled his Susanoo to shoot out the Kimui Shuriken in his hand. Accompanied by a deafening whistling sound, the huge Kimui Shuriken flew in a strange arc towards Hyojin, who was on the ground. Tisk Uchiha style throwing technique. Seeing this, Hyojin lightly spat. Obsidian's Shuriken throwing technique was a typical Uchiha style throwing technique. Because the flight route was not straight, it had a strange and unpredictable arc. Therefore, even with the Byakugan, it was difficult for Hyojin to accurately predict the flight path of the Shuriken in a short time and formulate a safe dodging path. Knowing that the more he hesitated, the more passive he would be, Hyojin's figure swayed. Instead of retreating, he rushed towards Obsidian. Only by giving Obsidian enough pressure could there be a glimmer of hope to force Obsidian to make a mistake and lure Obsidian to take the bait. Crack! Suddenly, the bones of Hyojin's left leg made a crisp sound. Under the pain, his body, which was flying forward, lost its balance, and the speed of the surprise attack instantly slowed down. Hyojin's heart trembled. Damn it, my body can't hold it anymore. Swish! The two huge Shunwei shurikens in the air were accompanied by a whistling sound, one on the left and one on the right, closing in on Hyojin's eyes. Unable to care much, Hyojin had a roll on the ground. Although he looked a little embarrassed, he still narrowly avoided the Shunwei shurikens that flew past his back. Clatter! In an instant, the black cloak on Hyojin's back was blown away by the aftermath of the Shunwei shurikens. The flesh on his back was not spared, as if it had been shaved by a sharp razor, and blood flowed. Hyojin, who narrowly avoided Obsidian's attack, did not care about the injury on his back. Instead, he took the opportunity to launch a counterattack. A pair of iron sand wings spread on his back, and he soared into the sky, waving the bone blade in his hand to slash at Obsidian in the distance. In a dark ruin, Ju's body slowly poked out of the ground. Looking at the fierce battle between Obsidian and Hyojin in the distance, White Ju said, "Shouldn't we get closer? We can't help Obsidian at such a distance, can we?" Black Ju shook his head. The underground is full of dense bone forest. If we get closer, we'll die. Do you want to taste the bone blade of that guy from Amatsukami? White Jew smiled awkwardly. Don't joke. His bone blade can even split obsidian susa. Black Jew did not say anything else. Instead, he looked at Hyojin in the distance, as if he was thinking about something. White Jew suddenly muttered in a low voice, Strange, that guy from Amitsukami clearly has a problem with his body. Why does he still maintain such a large underground bone forest? Since he can't use it anymore, shouldn't he remove it as soon as possible to reduce the burden on his body? Hearing White Jew's whisper, Black Jew also frowned. Immediately, his heart skipped a beat, and he blurted out, Not good. He may know of our existence. Maintaining the bone forest underground is to prevent us from getting close. There must be something hidden underground over there. On the battlefield, Hyojin, who was flying with the magnetic release, suddenly recovered his speed to the peak. He surprised Obsidian and slashed Obsidian's Susanoo from bottom to top. Seeing that his Susanoo was as fragile as a piece of tofu under Hyojin's inconspicuous bone blade, Obsidian was depressed, but he immediately responded. While dispelling Susu to save his ocular power, he took advantage of the fact that Hyojin's bone blade was not close to his body to enter the virtual state. And Hyojin, who had used all his strength to launch the final blow, seemed to be unable to hold on any longer. He directly spat out a large mouthful of blood in midair. Immediately afterward, the iron sand wings on his back instantly collapsed. Unable to maintain the magnetic release, he directly fell from the air and fell hard to the ground. Obsidian, who was in the virtual state, also fell to the ground at this time. The corners of his mouth rose. Can't hold on any more so soon. Hyojin, who fell to the ground, coughed up blood while raising his right hand to point at Obsidian and shouted, 10-finger piercing bullets. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The swift and violent bone bullets made a series of whistling sounds. However, no matter how fast the bone bullets were and how powerful they were, they could not hurt Obsidian in the virtual state at all. They passed through Obsidian's body as if passing through a piece of air, like a shadow. Obsidian slowly walked toward Hyojin. To be honest, I'm a little curious about who you are. An expert like you should not be unknown, but it doesn't matter. Everything is over. Chapter 498. You people from Amitsukami are really overconfident. Obsidian chuckled as he walked slowly towards Hyojin. Cough. Hyojin coughed up blood heavily as he struggled to retreat. But this type A wind release clone has reached its limit, and its limbs are not listening to him. Its speed of retreat is very slow, and it can't keep up with Obsidian. Seeing this scene, Obsidian joked, I can be relieved to be able to kill you here. In the distance, seeing that Hyojin has basically lost his ability to move, Red, who climbed out of the pit, didn't hesitate to get up and rush towards him. She knew that even if she rushed forward, she would not be of much use. At most, she would just die. However, she could not remain indifferent to the danger that Wind Chimes, who had saved her life, was in. At this time, Kakashi put his hand on Kurenai's shoulder and said in a low voice, Don't worry. He paid such a big price to protect Konoha. No matter what his identity is, we Konoha ninjas won't just watch him get killed. Kakashi has long seen that Red and Hikari seem to know each other, and it seems that they have a close personal relationship. Red bit her lip and said, I have never hated my incompetence as much as I do today. Kakashi moved his eyes to Obsidian in the distance and said, Don't be discouraged. We are still young, and there is still a chance to become stronger. Tonight is not your end. After saying that, Kakashi made a gesture. In an instant, 3 members of his special tactics team gathered, each holding a special kunai in their hands. Their expressions were firm, and there was no fear on their faces. This special tactics team was temporarily formed by Mai to deal with Obsidian. The 3 generations have spent a lot of time and effort in this regard, breaking the long-standing rules of the village. Regardless of merit or contribution, as long as one shows talent in space-time ninjutsu, they are eligible to be selected and try to practice the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. It was also because of the 3 generations' bold behavior of breaking the rules that 4 ninjas, including Kakashi, were selected from nearly 10,000 ninjas in the village who practiced the flying thunder god jutsu. However, due to the fact that they had only been training for a short period of time and their talents were not as good as the 4 generations Naruto, even the leader of the special tactics team, Kakashi, could only barely grasp the flying thunder god technique. He was far from being proficient in using it. But now, they have to act because if Amatsukami dies in the hands of the enemy, then no one will be able to stop this powerful enemy of Akatsuki. Swish, swish, swish. A series of special kunai were shot at Obsidian, blocking his path to Hyjin. The corner of the masked man's mouth twitched as he allowed the special kunai to penetrate his body that was in the ethereal state. Hyjin, who was on the ground, cursed in his heart, "A bunch of idiots, don't get in the way." In an instant, the figures flashed to the position of the first wave of special kunai, and while catching the special kunai in the air, they turned around and shot the second wave of kunai at Obsidian. Obsidian had already figured out the way of the flying thunder god technique. His body quickly switched between virtual and real, and with just a few punches and kicks, he knocked down the 3 members of the special tactics team. Buzz at this time, a sharp sound like thousands of birds chirping suddenly appeared behind Obsidian. Obsidian immediately virtual his body, allowing Kakashi, who was sneaking up on him from behind, to penetrate his body with lightning. Then, the moment Kakashi penetrated his body, he activated would release and pierced through Kakashi's back, throwing him away. Seeing Kakashi's special tactics team being easily defeated by Obsidian, Hyjin secretly frowned. He has learned his lesson. In the fight just now, Obsidian was unexpectedly cautious. The virtual state and real state were completely within a hair's breadth. There was no chance for him to attack at all. Kakashi, who fell to the ground, covered the wound that was penetrated by would release and asked Obsidian the question that had been pressing in his heart. "Tell me, who are you?" Obsidian obviously hesitated for a moment, thought about it, and replied, "Since you care so much about my identity, then I will tell you frankly. I am Madara Uchiha." Madara Uchiha? Kakashi was shocked and said, "This is impossible. He is long dead." Obsidian stood still at this time, glared at Kakashi, and said fiercely, "Humph, idiot who doesn't know anything, lie down obediently. Don't get in the way, trash like you are not qualified to die in my hands." "You?" Kakashi did not know what to say for a moment. Obsidian ignored Kakashi and stepped in front of Hyjin. Seeing Obsidian walking over in the virtual state, Hyjin struggled to stand up from the ground, holding a bone blade in his hand, and rushed towards Obsidian in a disorderly manner. Obito didn't dodge, allowing Kuroto to penetrate his hollowed figure, and then in the same way, he instantly entered the corporeal state and activated the wood release cutting technique, and then entered the hollowed state again. The switch between hollowed and corporeal took less than a second. At this time, a sharp wooden stake instantly pierced Hyjin's back. This was the wood cutting technique. Once pierced, if the caster was willing, he could activate the wood release again, allowing the wooden stake pierced into the target's body to grow rapidly, instantly destroying the target's internal organs. It was a very fierce wood release ninjutsu. Clang. However, the moment the wooden stake hit Hyjin's back, there was a sound of metal clashing. Obsidian's eyes narrowed, and only then did he realize that there was a layer of periosteum protruding from Hyjin's back, blocking his wood release. Hyjin, who missed his attack, fell to the ground again, vomiting blood while panting, as if he did not even have the strength to turn around, completely leaving his back to Obsidian. Seeing that he could not hurt his opponent at this point, Obsidian was a little annoyed. He immediately made up his mind and thought to himself, "Your periosteum can block my wood release, but can it block my holy might?" After making up his mind, Obsidian exited the virtual state and used holy might on Hyjin. In an instant, a twisted vortex appeared on Hyjin's back. 1 second, 2 seconds, the twisted vortex expanded rapidly, about to swallow Hyjin's entire body, and Obsidian had exited the virtual state for almost 2 seconds. Seeing that half of Hygene's body was distorted, Obsidian heaved a sigh of relief. It's finally over. Boom! At this moment, a flaming sword broke out of the ground without warning, piercing Obsidian's body from the bottom up. Hygen, who had been stripped of time and space by holy might, turned his body with difficulty, waved at Obsidian with his right hand that had not been distorted, and said with a smile, "Hey, goodbye forever." But soon, the smile on Hygen's face froze, because he found that not only was Obsidian sucked into the flaming sword, but his body, which was connected to holy might, also began to melt and was quickly sucked into the flaming sword. The scene changed. In the illusion of Sword of 10 Punches, Hygen and Obsidian stared at each other. Chapter 499. Roar. A crimson Susanoo broke out of the ground along with a huge flaming sword and let out a roar. The flaming sword pierced through the clouds, and a dazzling light illuminated the dark night sky, making this Susanoo, who was holding the sword, look like a real god. This change surprised all the my ninjas around. Like the previous emerald blue Susanoo, this crimson Susanoo has never been seen before, and it has never appeared in the intelligence. It is a strange Susanoo. Another Susanoo? What's going on? Is it an enemy? The surviving my ninjas were all shocked. Obsidian's wanton slaughter made them instinctively feel fear when they saw the Susanoo. Soon, everyone noticed that there was a mysterious ninja wearing a black cloak with golden edges and a flame-patterned mask, standing under the crimson Susanoo with a gourd in his hand. It's Amatsuki. Look at the mask. It should be Homasubi, right? The tense Konoha ninjas breathed a sigh of relief. Although it was difficult to distinguish between Amatsuki and friend, at least tonight, Amatsuki was not the enemy of Mai. In the distance, Red seemed to be drained of all her strength, fell to the ground, and let out a long sigh of relief. Great! Camera's companion finally made a move. Just now, when Wind Chime was in danger, her heart had risen to her throat. Kakashi, who was injured and fell to the ground, was carefully searching for the figure of the Akatsuki member who called himself Madara Uchiha. He was the closest my ninja to the battlefield. Although he was seriously injured, he was still conscious, so he clearly saw the attack of Homasubi just now. He saw that the flame sword stabbed the Akatsuki member who called himself Madara Uchiha and instantly absorbed him. That guy called Uchiha Madara. Was he killed by Homasubi of Amatsuki? After the search was fruitless, this thought flashed in Kakashi's mind. But he couldn't believe it. A strong enemy that could slaughter Konoha's Jonin at will and render the entire Konoha helpless was so easily dealt with. This is simply like a dream. After a short period of surprise, other my ninjas also discovered the disappearance of Obsidian at this time and realized that Homasubi of Amatsuki had killed the strong enemy who made them feel desperate. At this time, a my ninja murmured, Uchiha of Akatsuki was killed by Uchiha of Amatsuki, but Uchiha, shouldn't he belong to Mai? Listening to the murmur of their companions, a group of my ninjas were quite embarrassed. The scene in front of them is indeed a great irony to Mai. Red breathed a sigh of relief, but she suddenly found that the figure of Winchim had also disappeared from the battlefield, so she quickly ran to the Crimson Tsu and asked, "Where is Winchim?" Itachi, who was wearing a flame-patterned mask in Susanoo, was also speechless. The surprise attack just now was naturally discussed by Itachi and Hygen. In order to understand the whole situation of the battle, before Itachi arrived on the battlefield, he quietly dragged Hygen into a Jinjutsu through the inconspicuous Ninja Crow. In the Jinjutsu, he learned about the situation of the battle through Hygen and told Hygen that he got the news of Jutsu, and then the two discussed the tactics in the Jinjutsu. In this way, there was a scene just now. Hygen is very clear that except for himself, there is no bait in the entire battlefield that is worth Obsidian to take the risk, so he can only use himself as bait to lure Obsidian. Hygen firmly believes that Obsidian will not let go of such an opportunity. This was because the strength displayed by his Type A Wind Escape clone body was simply too strong. In terms of taijutsu, he can suppress Hiriko, who has 5 Kekiai Genkai, and in terms of ninjutsu, he has the magnet release, which not only improves his mobility, but also has the ability to attack and defend in a large area. In addition, he can also use the secret technique of the bone vein, the dance of the fern, to create the bone forest, which allows him to travel at will and avoid the space-time attacks of Kamui. It can be said that although this Type A wind release clone cannot restrain Obsidian's Kamui, but it can be immune to Kamui's sneak attacks, which can actually threaten Obsidian. Putting himself in Kuroto's shoes, if he was in Obito's shoes, he would also not let go of the Type A wind release clone. Besides, the fact that the Type A wind release clone was corroded by the Kekiai Genkai disease was not fake, so Hyojin did not need to put on a show in front of Obsidian to lure Obsidian to kill him. The results were just as Hyojin expected. When he faced Wind Chimes, who was heavily injured and could not fight back, Obsidian could not hold back and exited the illusory state, giving Itachi the chance to attack, who had been lying in ambush underground. Everything went smoothly, except for one small accident. No one expected that when Obsidian used Kamui to attack Hyojin, he and Hyojin, who was attacked by Kamui, were in a strange state of connection. When Obsidian was hit by Sword of 10 Punches and instantly fell into the illusory space of Sword of 10 Punches, Hyojin was also dragged into the illusory space of Sword of 10 Punches. At that moment, Itachi was in a bit of a dilemma. He had just obtained Sword of 10 Punches, and he was not familiar with how to use it yet. He did not know whether he could release his comrades who were accidentally injured. At the same time, he was worried that when he released his comrades, his target, Obsidian, would also escape from Sword of 10 Punches. In the distance, when he saw Obsidian disappear after being struck by the flaming sword, Black Jew scowled while he hid in the shadows. I didn't expect that it would be Sword of 10 Punches. This is really troublesome. White Jew was a little confused. An attack of this level shouldn't be able to injure Obsidian, right? Hey Jew said in a deep voice. The 10-fist sword is also known as the Wine Cutter Tachi, a sword of sealing. Legend has it that those who are pierced by it will fall into a dreamlike world of illusion and be sealed forever. It was only then that White Jew realized that something was wrong. He said in shock, Obsidian has been sealed? Black Jew said, yes, that seems to be the case for now. I really didn't expect that God's organization would actually find such a divine weapon. Looks like they have long since planned to deal with Obsidian. White Jew said gloomily, then what should we do? Chapter 500. Akatsuki wasn't the only one spying on the battlefield. In another shadow, Orochimaru stared at the crimson Susanoo on the battlefield, especially the gourd in Susanoo's hand, with a gloomy face. Oof, I was tricked by that wind chime. Orochimaru snorted. At this point, if he still couldn't react, then he wasn't one of the Sannin, Orochimaru. At this time, he completely understood that the encounter with Wind Chime in the ruins of Uchiha wasn't an accident, and it had nothing to do with him kidnapping Kurenai. It was only because Amatsukumi's target was also the Jukin, and the Jukin must be in the ruins of Uchiha. Damn it! Orochimaru couldn't help but feel annoyed at the thought that the divine artifact Tokugan's sword that he had been searching for so long had been taken by Amatsukumi, and the power of the Tokugan sword was even greater than he had expected. Of course, he didn't know that without the Manjikyu Sharingan, without the Jukin technique Tsukuyami, it would be impossible to get the Jukin. Even if it was in his hands, he wouldn't be able to use it. Withdrawing his gaze, Orochimaru looked around, and a trace of melancholy appeared on his face. For some reason, when Mai, whom he wanted to destroy, was destroyed in front of him, Orochimaru felt a sense of loss in his heart. Swish! But Orochimaru was Orochimaru after all. Soon, he put away this inexplicable feeling, and his figure flashed and disappeared. In the shelter, when Tendo used the second large-scale Shinra Tensei to destroy Hyojin's bone forest, there was a serious shock in the shelter. Although it wasn't as serious as the first time, the shock this time caused many parts of the shelter to collapse, and the damage was more serious. Cough! Red Bean, who was choked by the smoke, coughed and groped around. Since the last electric lamp on the dome of the passage was also damaged in the tremor just now, the passage was dark at this time, and one could not even see their fingers in front of them. Is everyone okay? At this moment, the mute's voice came from the darkness. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. The people in the passageway all spoke up, indicating that they were fine. Red Bean finally found the flashlight that fell on the ground. As a ninja guarding the shelter, a flashlight was standard equipment. She shook the flashlight, and soon a beam of light appeared in the passage. With the illumination of the flashlight, everyone gathered together again. Although the tremors just now had caused many collapses in the shelter, fortunately, there was no problem with this passage. Everyone was safe and sound, and the children were not injured. Yui looked at the top of her head worriedly and said, "What happened on the ground?" Hearing this, everyone's face became a bit more serious. Everyone was a ninja, and they knew that a normal battle was unlikely to affect the shelter that was tens of meters underground. For the shelter to suffer such a serious impact, there must have been an unimaginable fierce battle on the ground. Suddenly, there was a leisurely sound of footsteps coming from the passage. Red Bean shone the flashlight in the direction of the footsteps and shouted, "Who's there?" At this time, under the light of the flashlight, Orochimaru's figure gradually appeared. He smiled and said, "Is it Red Bean, Orochimaru?" Red Bean was stunned at first, and then her whole body exploded with a monstrous, murderous intent. "I will kill you with my own hands." After saying that, Red Bean rushed over. Multiple shadow snake hands. Almost at the same time, Red Bean and Orochimaru used the same ninjutsu. In an instant, countless poisonous snakes flew out from their sleeves and bit each other. Whoosh! Using this gap, Red Bean activated the teleportation technique and appeared behind Orochimaru. She stabbed Orochimaru's back with her kunai. Did it work? Feeling the blood flowing out of the kunai, Red Bean thought uncertainly. Suddenly, Orochimaru turned his neck 180 degrees and smiled at Red Bean. "You said you wanted to kill me, but the kunai in your hand avoided my vital parts. Little Red Bean, you're really not honest." Seeing that Orochimaru, who was stabbed by her, had a playful look on his face, Anko was both shocked and angry. At this time, Orochimaru seemed to think of something. The corner of his mouth slightly raised, and then his neck suddenly stretched around the back of Red Bean's neck and bit her. Let me go." Red Bean felt weak all over her body. After biting her, Orochimaru retracted his neck and smiled. "Little Red Bean, this is your punishment for being dishonest." Red Bean, who was covering her neck, suddenly felt dizzy. She was shocked and immediately asked, "Orochimaru, what did you just do to me?" Before Orochimaru could answer, Red Bean's eyes went black and she fainted. Dong! The flashlight in Red Bean's hand also fell to the ground. The slanted beam of light from the bottom up shone on Orochimaru's body. Such light made the ghostly and gloomy Orochimaru look even more strange. "Big Orochimaru, what do you want to do?" Facing Orochimaru, who was walking towards him, Mute stammered. As a powerhouse who almost became 4 generations Naruto, Orochimaru's reputation in Mai was so loud that many Mai ninjas were naturally afraid of him. Even an elite like Kakashi would inevitably panic when facing Orochimaru. Orochimaru's gaze bypassed Mute, Kuroto, and the others, and fell on Uchiha and Sasuke behind them. This time, Orochimaru's purpose of invading the sanctuary was to kidnap Uchiha and Sasuke before Mai could react. Through the previous battle between Kimimaro and Sasuke, Orochimaru discovered that although Sasuke's talent was not as good as Itachi and Jishui's, it was still very high. After all, not many Uchiha could open the Sharingan at the age of 8. Feeling Orochimaru's fiery gaze, Sasuke felt a chill down his spine, as if he was really being stared at by a poisonous snake. The Sharingan in his eye sockets also opened subconsciously. Orochimaru stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. Tsuke, what a pair of beautiful eyes. Izumi Uchiha immediately stood in front of Sasuke to protect him and shouted at Orochimaru, "If you dare to have any ideas about Sasuke, our patriarch will not let you go." At this time, Naruto also stood in front of Sasuke to protect him. Boom! At this moment, there was a sudden explosion on the other side of the tunnel. Then, a figure wearing a forehead protector and the Akatsuki red cloud suit walked out of the hole of the explosion. His gaze scanned a few people in the tunnel and finally locked on Naruto, who was in front of Sasuke. Chapter 501. Orochimaru has already made everyone feel desperate, and suddenly another member of the Akatsuki organization appeared, causing the people in the tunnel to feel dizzy. Sasuke, Naruto, and the other children were even more terrified. In the previous battle, they almost experienced the taste of death, and now they know that a real battle is not like the ninja games they used to play in their families. Therefore, whether it is the arrogant Sasuke or the careless Naruto, at this moment, all of them are trembling. The timid Hinata even grabbed his brother Ningxi's clothes and buried his head low. Only the precocious Ningxi barely managed to put on a soft fist posture, but his slightly trembling hands exposed the fear in his heart. At this time, Orochimaru saw the uninvited guest in front of him, and his face sank. Kakuzu. In the Akatsuki organization, there are many people that Orochimaru is afraid of, but Kakuzu is not one of them. But it is not easy for Orochimaru to defeat Kakuzu. Soon, Kakuzu walked out of the smoke and dust caused by the explosion, and while walking towards the children, he said to Orochimaru coldly, "Orochimaru, I have no interest in killing you, so you better not get in my way." Kakuzu's mission to invade the sanctuary is very clear. That is to follow Nagato's order and capture Mai's Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Facing Kakuzu's threat, Orochimaru smiled indifferently and immediately walked towards the children. Looking at the two strong enemies gradually approaching, Mute, Kuroto, Uchiha, and Izumi, the three female ninjas braced themselves and prepared to fight. But at this moment, not only are they injured, but their chakra is also exhausted, so they don't have much combat power left. At this time, Orochimaru and Kakuzu's eyes met. From each other's actions, they could tell that the other party's target was the children in the corridor. However, because the children were gathered together, it was hard for them to tell which child the other party's target was and whether or not it was in conflict with their own target. At this time, Kakuzu stopped and said solemnly, "Orochimaru, do you really want to force me to act?" Orochimaru shrugged. "No one can stop me from doing what I want to do, not even your Akatsuki." Jiaodo's eyes turned cold as he slowly raised his hands. Orochimaru also raised his right arm and pointed at Kakuzu. For a moment, the dark passageway was filled with the smell of gunpowder. Da-da-da! At the moment when the battle was about to break out, a rush of footsteps came from a distance. Just by listening to the footsteps, it was obvious that there were a lot of people, at least a dozen. The members of Akatsuki are all elite ninjas, and they usually work in groups of two, and sometimes they even work alone. Therefore, the footsteps of these people are definitely not members of Akatsuki. They are most likely Konoha ninjas who came to support the shelter, so Shuriken immediately shouted for help. "There are enemies here. Quickly come and help." Mute's cry for help was like throwing a match into a barrel of gunpowder. In an instant, Orochimaru and Kakuzu attacked at the same time. Hidden Shadow, Snake Hand. Orochimaru used his best ninjutsu against Kakuzu while his figure flashed and rushed towards the children. Fire escape, hard work. In the face of the countless poisonous snakes rushing towards him, Kakuzu immediately printed a hand seal and used a small ninjutsu to burn all the snakes that rushed towards him into charcoal. Seeing that Kakuzu was caught by the snakes he released, the corner of Orochimaru's mouth rose, revealing a devilish smile. At this time, Kuroto had already rushed to the front of the children and in just a moment, he knocked down Uchiha Izumi, Hyuga Yui, and Hyuga Yui, who had exhausted their chakra in front of the children. But because Naruto was in front of Sasuke, and Hinata and Ningxi were also beside Sasuke, so Orochimaru hesitated a little and stretched out his left hand towards the children. In an instant, a python as thick as a thigh flew out of his left sleeve and wrapped around all 4 children. Immediately, he glanced at Kakazu not far away from the corner of his eyes, and a trace of ridicule appeared on the corner of his mouth. In the case of not paying the price himself, Orochimaru is very happy to destroy the Akatsuki's actions. Kacha, suddenly, the ground under the feet of the children cracked, and a monster composed of a mask and black tentacles broke out of the ground and spat out a wind-release ninjutsu, cutting off the pythons that entangled the children, and then used the black tentacles to wrap around the children. Seeing that his python was cut off by the ninjutsu, Orochimaru was not willing to show weakness and immediately stretched out his hands to grab the children. For a moment, the helpless children were like sheep facing 2 wild beasts. Orochimaru's target was actually only Sasuke, but Naruto was worried about Sasuke's safety and stood in front of Sasuke, so Orochimaru had to capture Naruto and Sasuke together. Seeing that Naruto was in danger, Hinata, who has always been timid, gathered his courage and used a soft fist to meet Orochimaru's attack. On the other side, seeing the black tentacles coming, Ningxi also gathered his courage and used a soft fist. Orochimaru and Kakuzu seemed to be afraid of hurting the children, so the fight between Orochimaru and Kakuzu was very restrained. But for the experienced Orochimaru and Kakuzu, even if it's a restrained fight, it's still filled with killing intent, and it's not something that Hinata and Neji can resist. Therefore, the 2 children's futile attack not only failed to repel the strong enemy, but also caused them to lose their lives. But because of Hinata and Ningxi's sudden attack, Orochimaru and Kakuzu's actions were disrupted, causing Orochimaru to capture Naruto and Hinata, while Kakuzu caught Sasuke and Ningxi. Realizing that their targets fell into the enemy's hands, Orochimaru and Kakuzu's face changed. But this time, the footsteps in the tunnel were getting closer and closer. Both Orochimaru and Kakuzu knew that because of Amatsukumi's intervention, the battle on the ground had ended. At this time, if they stayed in the sanctuary for too long, not to mention capturing their targets, they might not even be able to escape safely. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, they decided to stop. Orochimaru captured Naruto and Hinata, and Kakuzu took Sasuke and Ningxi. As soon as the 2 left, a group of reinforcements led by Asuma and Guy arrived. Looking at the few female ninjas on the ground, Asuma was shocked and quickly asked, "What happened? Did the enemy invade the sanctuary?" Mute forced himself to say, "It's Orochimaru and the Akatsuki." Not only did they capture Naruto, but they also captured Uchiha and the Hyuga family's children. "Quick, chase after them." Asuma and Guy looked at each other. Both of them realized the seriousness of the problem, so they did not dare to hesitate and immediately led the team to chase after them. Chapter 502. In the Illusion of Sword of the 10 Punches. Hyojin, who has fallen into the illusion, still maintained the posture of waving goodbye to Obsidian, and the smile of a winner has not even had time to calm down. On the other hand, Obsidian stared at Hyojin, his body leaned forward slightly, still maintaining the posture of using the pupil technique Kamui before. The 2 people who were still plotting against each other a moment ago, and the next second they fell into a strange illusion together, becoming a pair of brothers in hardship. This scene is extremely embarrassing. Hyojin put down his hand in embarrassment. He was speechless. He used himself as bait and calculated everything. He even guessed Obsidian's thoughts. He thought that this time he could completely solve the big problem of Obsidian, but he never thought that he would be dragged into the seal of Sword of the 10 Punches by Obsidian after being attacked by Kamui. It's really one wrong step, and the whole game is lost. Obsidian was also surprised at this moment. He has realized that he has been tricked again. Although he doesn't know what kind of space this is, as Uchiha has the Manjikyu Sharingan, he is naturally very sensitive to all kinds of Genjutsu, so he can feel that he is trapped in an ordinary Genjutsu space. After looking around, Obsidian snorted and said, "Humph, is this the method you use to trick me?" Hyojin curled his lips and did not answer. Although he knows that this is the illusion of sort of the 10 punches, Hyojin has entered it for the first time, so what he knows is actually not much more than Obsidian. Seeing Hyojin did not answer, Obsidian sneered and said, "Do you think that this kind of Genjutsu can trap me? Stupid." After saying that, Obsidian activated his Manjikyu Sharingan. In an instant, the triple-edged shuriken kaleidoscope in his eye sockets slowly spun. Hyojin looked at Obsidian with a complicated expression. He hoped that Obsidian could break the sword of 10 punches, but at the same time, he didn't want Obsidian to break the sword of 10 punches. If Obsidian could break the sword of 10 punches, then he would most likely be able to find a way out. But if Obsidian really did break the sword of 10 punches, then he didn't know how else he could kill Obsidian. At least before he completed the Bloodline Dragnet plan, there was no way he could kill Obsidian. After waiting for a while, and seeing that there were no changes in the surroundings, Hyojin lightly spat, "Tisk." Listening to Hyojin's disdainful whisper, Obsidian blushed and said, "This Genjutsu is a bit good, but so what? There is nothing in the world that can trap me. Uchiha Madara." As soon as his voice fell, Obsidian activated Kamui, and a twisting vortex appeared on his body. He can still use Kamui? Hyojin stared at Obsidian. However, although the twisting vortex was constantly rotating, it did not strip Obsidian out of the sword of 10 punches illusion. How could this be? This time Obsidian finally panicked. This is the first time he encountered a situation where Kamui failed. Hyojin retracted his gaze and said, "This is indeed the artifact Sword of 10 Punches." Although he doesn't know much about Sword of 10 Punches, he knows that Itachi once used Sword of 10 Punches to seal Nagato's impure body. One must know that at that time, Nagato's impure body relied on the ability of the Rinnegan to fight against 3 enemies, and he suppressed Naruto and Chillabai, who were considered to be at the top of the shinobi world at that time. His pupil power is not much worse than Itachi's, but in the face of Itachi's Sword of 10 Punches, he still couldn't resist even a little bit. From this point alone, it can be seen that it is impossible to get rid of the seal of Sword of 10 Punches alone. Obsidian quickly asked Hyojin, "What kind of illusion is this?" Hyojin said lightly, "Do you think I will tell you?" Obsidian's face sank. "You don't need to deny it. I believe you should also feel it. You don't want to die with me, do you?" As soon as he fell into the illusion of Sword of 10 Punches, Obsidian vaguely felt that something was wrong. This is the reason why he did not choose to continue to fight with Hyojin, but to try to escape from the illusion first. Because his intuition told him that if he can't escape quickly, he will probably be trapped here forever. Hyojin remained silent. He naturally did not want to die with Obsidian. For him, although the threat of Obsidian is great, it is far from worth risking his life. In fact, as long as Hyojin can successfully complete his bloodline net plan and achieve the same bloodline net as Otsutsuki Kagaya, then there will be many ways to deal with Obsidian. But he is not in a hurry to join forces with Obsidian to escape the illusion of Sword of 10 Punches, because he is still not sure if Itachi has any other way to release him from Sword of 10 Punches alone. After all, it took a lot of effort to seal Obsidian in Sword of 10 Punches this time. Suddenly, a burst of fog with a strong aroma of wine gushed out from the surrounding space. As soon as they smelled this wine, Hyojin and Obsidian felt dizzy, as if even their minds were paralyzed. Obsidian said anxiously, "Damn it, what are you still hesitating for?" Right at this moment, a voice that sounded like it came from all directions. "Senior Wind, I haven't figured out a way to release a sealed person yet, so I need your cooperation in order to release you." Hyojin frowned. "How do I cooperate?" Obsidian also pricked up his ears and listened attentively. "Later, I will use my ocular powers to activate the sealed state again. Please seize the opportunity and find a way to escape from the inside. Also, do not be confused by the illusion. Once you fall into the illusion, You will never be able to escape. The illusory voice once again reverberated in the illusory realm of the 10-punch sword. Hyojin's expression changed, and he thought to himself, "Oh no, even Itachi can't get me out." Obsidian was on full alert at this time, waiting for the opportunity to escape. He has now realized his situation and knew that there was only one chance to escape. Once he missed it, everything would be over. Hyojin did not waste any more time and waited for the opportunity that Itachi mentioned. A moment later, a flame appeared in the illusion of sword of 10 punches, piercing through the sky. There is no doubt that Itachi once again activated sword of 10 punches from the outside, putting it in an attacking state and opening the subtle connection between the outside and the inside of sword of 10 punches. Hyojin and Obsidian looked at each other and understood that the time has come. At this time, Obsidian fully stimulated his Manjikyu Sharingan and exerted his pupil powers to the limit. As Obito activated his ocular power, a crack finally appeared in the flames. However, the crack was too small, and it couldn't accommodate one person at all. Damn it! Obsidian, who had already exhausted his strength, roared in despair. He understood that his pupil powers alone were not enough to open a gap to escape, and in the illusion, he was the only one with pupil powers. At this moment, an inexplicable pupil powers also poured in, and the gap in the flame instantly became larger. Following the source of the pupil powers, Obsidian looked at Hyojin and asked suspiciously, "You?" Chapter 503. Swoosh with a flash of brilliance, the scene in front of Kuroto suddenly darkened. Immediately, the familiar night sky and the messy battlefield were reflected in his eyes. Did I escape? After letting out a long sigh of relief, an indescribable sense of exhaustion overwhelmed him and swallowed him completely. At this moment, he was completely paralyzed as if he had lost control of his body. Smack! With a low muffled sound, Suijin fell head-on to the ground. Oh no, this clone can't hold on any longer. Hyojin, who had fallen to the ground, was panicking. According to Kuroto's speculation, the reason why he lost control of his body at this moment is mostly due to the blood disease of the Type A wind release clone, which has already spread to the central nervous system of the clone, so not to mention extracting chakra to perform ninjutsu. Even blinking his eyes is a very difficult thing for him. However, Obsidian was right behind him. If Obsidian were to make a sudden attack, he would not even need to use ocular techniques or ninjutsu. All he needed to do was throw some ninja tools, and he would be able to easily destroy this Type A wind release clone. Just as Hyojin was worried, Obsidian's figure appeared in a flash of light. Needless to say, Obsidian had also seized that short moment to escape from the illusion of the sword of 10 punches. What should I do? Feeling Obsidian's appearance, Hyojin, who had fallen to the ground, felt his heart skip a beat. He put all his effort into thinking of a way to deal with this situation. Since the beginning of the battle, this was the first time he felt so helpless and hopeless. Obsidian, who had escaped from the illusion, immediately noticed Hyojin, who had fallen to the ground not far away and seemed to have lost his ability to move. Bastard, this trick again? At this moment, Obsidian was extremely angry. He felt that his intelligence had been greatly insulted. Immediately, he entered the state of void form and disappeared into a twisted vortex. The speed at which he escaped was fast and decisive. There was even a hint of panic in his movements. Whoosh! A gust of night wind blew, stirring up dust on the ground. Hyojin, who was lying on the ground, was startled. He did not understand how Obsidian managed to escape in such a flustered manner. But at least there was something to be happy about, and that was that the Type A windmill clone would not be destroyed immediately. After that, his spirit separated from the Type A wind escape clone and silently burrowed into the ground. In the distance, seeing Hyojin and Obsidian escaping from the 10-punch sword together, Itachi sighed softly. He has already expected this situation. After all, Obsidian, who can activate the almost complete Susanoo, obviously has a pair of Manjiku Sharingan that is not weak. In theory, he is more likely to escape from sword jutsu than Kazuma. So if Kazuma can escape from sword jutsu, then Obsidian must also be able to escape, which is almost inevitable. Unless he sacrificed wind chimes so that he could die with the Obsidian. But Itachi can't make such a decision. He has no right to decide the life and death of his comrades. At this time, Red ran to the side of the Type A wind release clone and asked anxiously, "Kazuma, are you okay?" Since the Type A wind release clone no longer has Hyojin's spirit, naturally there will not be any response. Seeing that Windchime seemed to have lost consciousness, Red panicked. She shook the Type A wind escape clone and shouted, "Windchime! Kazuma?" Itachi also walked over with a solemn expression. He did not expect Kazuma to be so seriously injured that he seemed to have completely lost consciousness. "Let me do it." Suddenly, a calm voice came from behind Red. Red turned her head and saw that the voice came from the strongest medical ninja in the ninja world, Tsunade, so she quickly stepped forward and said, "Tsunade-sama, please." Tsunade just looked at Red and didn't say anything. Immediately, she walked towards the Type A wind release clone lying on the ground and said to Itachi on the side, "I will treat him." Itachi, who was wearing the uniform of Tsukumi, nodded and stepped aside. Letting one of the Sannin, Tsunade, to treat him is naturally the best. At the same time, a group of my ninjas, including Jiraiya and Kakashi, also approached Kuroto. In the continuous battles tonight, Tsukumi's organization Kazuma contributed a lot to the village. If it weren't for him, it would have been difficult for Mai to deal with the monster that came out of the box of bliss. Therefore, even though many Konoha ninjas were still wary of Tsukumi, they didn't have any malicious intent towards Kamikaze who fought alongside them. On the contrary, many Konoha ninjas were very grateful towards Kamikaze. After a while of treatment, Tsunade's brows furrowed even tighter as if she had encountered something unbelievable. Jiraiya, who was familiar with Tsunade, quickly went over and asked, "Is he okay?" Tsunade said solemnly, "This is unbelievable. All his organs are damaged, and his bones are broken in many places. There's also serious internal bleeding." Itachi changed his tone and asked, "What do you mean?" Tsunade glanced at Itachi and said, "No one can use their body to this extent. A normal person should have died a long time ago." Red asked anxiously, "You can definitely cure him, right?" Tsunade shook her head and sighed softly. "Unfortunately, there is nothing I can do. This is beyond the scope of medical ninjutsu." There's one more thing that Tsunade didn't say. That is, she found that her medical ninjutsu doesn't seem to work on the body of Kaze-chime. Or rather, there seems to be some kind of destructive toxin in the body of Kaze-chime that is resisting her treatment. Red fell to the ground in a daze. Jiraiya and Kakashi sighed, while Itachi was stunned and couldn't believe it, in a cave far away from my village. In an instant, a pair of sapphire blue eyes suddenly opened. It was none other than Hyojin, whose spirit body had returned to his escape body. He knew that since my village had become the Akatsuki's target, all areas around the village would no longer be safe. So he opened a temporary base in a remote underground place far away from the village to store his escape body. Moving his body a little, Hyojin smiled and said, "Sure enough, my own body is still the most comfortable." The original Type A wind release clone body was actually very comfortable to control, but as the blood disease worsened, the Type A wind release clone body became more and more difficult to control. In the end, Hyojin even had to endure great pain. So after returning to his escape body, he really felt extremely comfortable. Chapter 504. Soon, Mai and the others saw a blue light appear in the sky. It was like a meteor, flying towards the direction of the village at an incredible speed. What? What a strong chakra wave. Is it an enemy? Everyone be careful. In an instant, the village that had just calmed down fell into chaos again. Just by looking at the other party's chakra wave and flying speed, one could tell that the other party's strength must be extraordinary. Therefore, whether it was Jiraiya, Tsunade, or the ordinary my ninjas, all of them were ready to fight to the death. Although the village was destroyed, Mai's reputation must not be tarnished. Swoosh, accompanied by a sharp whistle, the blue light descended from the sky and landed steadily in the middle of the village. The black cloak with golden edges and the hideous ghost mask. The Mai ninjas sighed in relief when they saw the appearance of the newcomer. The leader of Tsukumi, Yama, had finally appeared. The person who descended from the sky was naturally Hyojin. After landing, he exited the Tenseigan chakra mode and slowly walked towards his wind release type A clone. Seeing Kurosu sitting beside the type A wind release clone, as if she was tidying up the remains of the type A wind release clone, Kurosu was speechless and asked, "Can you hand him over to me?" Red asked, "Can you save him?" Hyojin was stunned for a moment and replied, "Maybe." Red nodded silently and stepped aside with some anticipation. Carrying the type A wind release clone on his shoulder, Kuroto signaled to Itachi, who was standing beside him. Immediately after, both of them disappeared in a flash. After leaving the messy Mai village, Hyojin and Itachi stopped in a forest outside the village. Hyojin placed the type A wind blend clone down from his shoulder and took out a storage scroll from his storage bag. He then temporarily sealed the type A wind blend clone into the storage scroll. Seeing this, Itachi asked, "Senior, Lady Tsunade said that Senior Wind is hopeless. Could it be true?" Hyojin smiled. "Don't worry, I have a way." Itachi was relieved. In his heart, if Hyojin said there was a way, then there must be a way. So he looked at the battlefield where Jishui rushed to and said, "Senior, Brother Jishui went there." After sealing the Type A Wind Escape clone, Hyojin shifted his gaze over and nodded. Previously, during the fierce battle in the village, Hyojin had used the magnetic escape to fly high into the sky many times. Therefore, he had long noticed the other battlefield outside the village. After all, the commotion over there was no less than the one in the village. He was even sure that the two sides fighting over there should be Five Shadows and Nagato. After putting away the storage scroll, Hyojin said, "Come, let's go there." "Yes." Itachi quickly nodded. Boom, 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 another series of explosions, and Jishui had to retreat. Fortunately, his Susanoo was equipped with the artifact Yada no Kagami. Ordinary explosions not only did not hurt him at all, but they also did not consume much of his ocular power. Staring at sure sway under the emerald green Susu, Konan, who was flying in the air, had a solemn expression on her beautiful face. Jishui's combat power had greatly exceeded her expectations. Just to stop Jishui from entering the main battlefield had forced her to use all her skills. She even used several traps that she had set up in advance to prevent accidents. However, everything seemed to be in vain. No matter what kind of attack she used, it seemed that she could not break through Jishui's Susanoo. Is it because of that shield? Conan's attention was focused on the artifact Yada no Kagami that Jishui's Susanoo was equipped. Roar. At this moment, a shocking roar came from the main battlefield in the distance. Xiaonan let out a sigh of relief when she heard the furious roar. She thought to herself, "It should be about time." On the ground, Jishui's face sank. Not good. Something must have happened over there. He was familiar with this roar. He had participated in the raid on the Hidden Rain village, and he knew very well that this roar was made by the summoned creature of the Akatsuki leader Nagato, the strange giant that could resist Hyojin's golden wheel reincarnation explosion. Through the fight just now, Jishui has discovered that the Akatsuki member in the air seemed to be unable to break through his Susanoo equipped with a Yada no Kagami. So he decided to ignore the opponent's attack and went straight to the main battlefield not far away. After making up his mind, Jishui let the countless detonation talismans wrap around him from all directions and forcibly broke through Conan's blockade and arrived at the main battlefield. But the scene in front of him shocked him. The red-haired Akatsuki leader stood quietly in front of the strange giant with an indifferent expression. The Yonde Mizukage Goji Yagura and the cloud villages Hachibi were lying on the ground motionless. It was unknown whether they were alive or dead. Not only that, the strange giant behind the Akatsuki leader seemed to be absorbing the tailed beast chakra from Goji Yagura and chakra. Two-tailed beast chakra that was so strong that it was visible to the naked eye was being extracted from Goji Yagura and chakra and absorbed into the body of the strange giant through their noses and mouths. Shifting his gaze, Shursui found that there were many ninjas from the 5 great shinobi villages lying on the ground. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. With just a glance, he found the figures of Yondaime Kazakage and Yondaime Reikage among them. The 4 generations of Kazakage seemed to have completely lost consciousness and fell in a pool of blood, while the 4 generations Liang was obviously still breathing and seemed to be struggling to get up, but due to his heavy injuries after several attempts, he still helplessly fell to the ground. The 5 Kages lost. Jishui staggered a step in a daze. The scene in front of him really subverted his inherent concept. He never thought that the 5 Kages would lose even after joining hands. This is simply impossible for him. Conan landed beside Nagato and said, "I'm sorry, I couldn't stop him." Nagato said lightly, "It's okay." Although the battle just now consumed a lot of chakra from Nagato, for Nagato, a mere Uchiha with Manjikyu Sharingan is not a strong enemy. At this time, Conan looked at the outer path demon statue behind her and said with some worry, "Absorbing 2 Jinchuriki at once, Nagato. Can your body hold it?" Nagato said, "Don't worry, this kind of thing is not a big burden for my current body." After fusing with the Hashirama cells, Nagato's immortal body has been qualitatively improved. In the original time and space, all the members of Akatsuki needed to participate in the absorption process, but now he can do it alone, and he can absorb 2 Jinchuriki at once. Chapter 505. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A group of figures was galloping through the forest. Their speed was so fast that they looked like phantoms. If there was a Jutsu ninja here, they would have noticed that this group of people are all heavily armed elites of the Uchiha police force, and among them is even the current patriarch of the Uchiha clan, Uchiha Fuyue. This group of Uchiha elites was chasing a member of the Akatsuki organization wearing a red cloud suit, and from the scarlet eyes of this member, it could be seen that he is also a member of the Uchiha clan. "Shinichi, don't run anymore, turn back." Fugaku's 3 Tomo Sharingan stared at the figure in front of him and shouted. There is no doubt that this member of the Akatsuki organization being chased by the elites of the Uchiha clan is none other than Shinichi of the Uchiha clan, who defected from the My clan and joined the Akatsuki organization. Shinichi turned his head and glanced at the clansmen behind him, but didn't say anything. This chase was actually intentional by Shinichi. After he received the news that the entire Nagato clan has retreated, he immediately understood that Nagato is going to use some kind of extremely destructive move. So he deliberately appeared in front of the Uchiha clan and led the elites of the Uchiha clan to chase him out of the village, narrowly avoiding the Shinra Tensei that Tendo has been preparing for a long time. At this time, Fuyue tried to persuade him again. "I know that you still hate the village, but this is not a reason for you to defect. You also saw the scene just now. The Akatsuki organization is full of lunatics. Following them will not end well." When Tendo used the large-scale Shinra Tensei, they just happened to reach the outer wall of the village, so they all saw the amazing scene with their own eyes. In just an instant, the village of Mai that has shocked the shinobi world for decades was reduced to ruins. Fuyue, who also has the Manjikyu Sharingan, was keenly aware of the surprised look on Shinichi's face when he saw this scene, so he understood that Shinichi must not have known about this beforehand. Shinichi curled his lips when he heard this. When he first decided to defect, he really hated the village, hated his family, felt betrayed by everyone, and even awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan. But when he was defeated and subdued by Hyojin, and learned that his beloved Uchiha Kurumi might be resurrected, the hatred in his heart was gradually replaced by the anger of being fooled by the obsidian. At this time, he no longer has any hatred for the village and his family. On the contrary, after learning the whole story, knowing that the mastermind behind all this is the guy from the Akatsuki organization, who calls himself Madara Uchiha, like all the other Uchihas, he immediately transferred all his hatred and willingly became an undercover agent of Hyojin in the Akatsuki organization. This is also the reason why he deliberately led his people away from the village and escaped the previous catastrophe. But he can't say it clearly because there's a pair of eyes staring at him in the dark. Since the three great shinobi villages joined forces to raid the Rain Village, Nagato and Obsidian have strengthened the internal monitoring of the Akatsuki organization, and perhaps aware of Shinichi's increasingly perfunctory attitude, Obsidian even arranged a white Zetsu clone to monitor him 24 hours a day. In the past, even if he was being monitored, because of his perceptive perception, the white Zetsu clone that was monitoring Shinichi didn't dare to get too close to him, which allowed Shinichi to find many opportunities to secretly pass information about the Akatsuki organization to Hyojin. But now, the white Zetsu clone that was ordered by Obsidian to monitor Shinichi doesn't care about being discovered by Shinichi at all. So he just stared at Shinichi in the dark, not giving Shinichi any opportunity to pass information to Hyojin, nor can he say anything to Fuyue behind him. After a while, Shinichi stopped in a relatively open forest. The elites of the Uchiha police force who were chasing him also stopped and spread out in a circle, surrounding him in the center. At this time, Fuyue came out and said in a deep voice, "The Danzo-S roots have been eliminated by the village. Let go of the past. The village needs you now, and the family also needs you. The Manjikyu Sharingan cannot be used by the enemy to attack the village. Fuyue has considered a coup, but never considered defection. In the original story, even if he chose to die calmly after the coup failed, he never revealed the slightest intention of defection. In the heart of the Uchiha patriarch, Uchiha and Mai have long been integrated into one, and he will never allow any foreign enemy to use Sharingan to harm the village." Shinichi smiled and said, "Don't you think it's ridiculous to say this now?" Fuyue said calmly, "It's nothing to be ridiculous about. The village can be rebuilt. As long as Uchiha is here, Mai will not perish." To some extent, this attack by the Akatsuki is not a bad thing for the Uchiha clan, because with the destruction of the village, Naruto will inevitably suffer a heavy blow, and as one of the founders of Mai, Uchiha will naturally gain more power in the village. After all, because of the pursuit of Shinichi, the elites of the Uchiha clan were not damaged in the previous large-scale Shinra Tensei. Shinichi said jokingly, "You can't stop me." Seeing that Shinichi has no intention to repent, Fuyue shook his head and said, "As the patriarch, I have no choice but to capture you." After saying that, Fuyue's scarlet eyes suddenly changed. The three Magatama turned into a three-edged shuriken pattern similar to Itachi's kaleidoscope shape, but the blade is thinner, and there is an additional black dot between each blade. Manjikyu Sharingan. Chapter 506. Why are you telling me this? Fuyue frowned. In the black and white Jinjutsu space, the progress of the blur suddenly stopped. Shinichi shook his head with a smile and didn't answer. He can only transmit the information in the Jinjutsu space, otherwise it will be detected by White Zetsu's doppelganger. The reason why he passed this information to Fuyue is because he can't find any other safe channel to pass it to Hyojin. And passing it to Fuyue is basically passing it to Jishui. With the relationship between Jishui and Hyojin, it is equivalent to passing it to Hyojin. Although there is a certain risk, he must pass the information because he wants to inform Hyojin about his situation through this information transmission. Seeing Shinichi shaking his head without saying anything, Fuyue continued to persuade him. "It seems that you're not completely loyal to the Akatsuki organization. In that case, come back. The family will help you solve your previous crimes." Shinichi said coldly, "Patriarch, let's stop this topic here. He will not easily leave the Akatsuki organization before getting Hyojin's notice. Because the more he understands the Akatsuki organization, the more he understands the significance of lurking in the Akatsuki organization. Being able to observe the actions of this group of lunatics at a close distance is of great significance to both Mai and the entire shinobi world. This is also the reason why he hasn't taken the risk to contact Hyojin. You don't seem to know your own situation. Fuyue snorted. The black and white Jinjutsu space that has been stagnant was activated again. Looking around, Shinichi found that everything around him, whether it is the grass, the trees, the sky, or the earth, everything seems to be melting. The color is also mottled little by little, gradually becoming monotonous black and white. At this time, Fuyue's voice came from the air again. Don't worry, I won't kill you. Your defection. The family also has some responsibility. Without waiting for Fuyue to finish his words, Shinichi, who had a playful look on his face, disappeared into thin air in the black and white illusion space. Fuyue was shocked. There was no pupil technique confrontation, nor was there any Jinjutsu to break through. Kuroto found that Shinichi just used the Manjikyu Sharingan and inexplicably got rid of his pupil technique. Kuroto didn't have time to stop him. No, it should be said that he didn't have time to notice that Shinichi had already disappeared from his Jinjutsu space. Fuyue, who had regained his senses, asked, "How did you do it?" Shinichi grinned. "Don't waste your precious ocular powers. Your illusion is useless against me." After saying that, Shinichi's figure flashed and disappeared without any hesitation. At this time, all the elites of Uchiha looked at Fuyue, waiting for the patriarch to give the order to chase. However, Fuyue frowned and stood in the same place without saying a word. He still hasn't figured out how Shinichi broke the illusion of his Manjikyu Sharingan just now, and if he can't figure this out, he obviously won't be able to catch Shinichi, who also has the Manjikyu Sharingan. On Shinichi's side, after getting rid of the pursuit of the Uchiha clan, Kuroto's scarlet eyes immediately turned back to their original black color. After learning that every time he used the Manjikyu Sharingan, he would lose a part of his ocular powers, Shinichi began to pay attention to protecting his Manjikyu Sharingan. Basically, he will not use the Manjikyu Sharingan unless it's a last resort. As expected of the patriarch, I didn't expect him to hide it from me for so long. Recalling the fight just now, Shinichi was galloping in the forest while sighing. Including the patriarch, there should be 5 Uchiha with Manjikyu Sharingan in the shinobi world. Shinichi counted himself, Jisue, Obsidian who pretended to be Uchiha Madara, and Uchiha Hashirama, and came to the conclusion that there are a total of 5 pairs of Manjikyu Sharingan in the shinobi world. As for how he knew that Uchiha Hashirama also has Manjikyu Sharingan, it's all because Obsidian announced to the members of Akatsuki that Homusubi of Amatsukami is a woman. At that time, Shinichi guessed that Homusubi of Amatsukami must be Uchiha Hashirama. After all, it's related to Hyojin's Amatsukami, and it's a female Uchiha, so he can only think of Uchiha Hashirama. Hey, I'm really the strongest. Thinking about it, a smile appeared on Shinichi's face, because he found that his pupil technique seems to be the most wonderful pair of Manjikyu Sharingan, especially his right eye, which contains the pupil technique Temporal House, which can turn back time in a small range. As long as he realizes that he is in a Jinjutsu, he can activate Temporal House to instantly turn back time and get rid of any Jinjutsu. Just now, he turned back time and directly got rid of Fuyue's Manjikyu Sharingan level Jinjutsu. This is also the reason why Obsidian is afraid of Shinichi and sent Shinichi's clone to monitor Shinichi 24/7. Because Shinichi's Temporal House can easily crack the Kamui. Even if Obsidian successfully separates Shinichi from the original space-time and throws him into the Kamui space, Shinichi can still turn back time and return to the shinobi world through Temporal House. The reason why Shinichi doesn't dare to fight with Obsidian is because his pupil technique is limited. Without the Manjikyu Sharingan, he will definitely lose if he gets entangled. It didn't take long for Shinichi to arrive at the rendezvous point of the Akatsuki organization. At the moment, Kakuzu was the only one at the rendezvous point. He was sitting quietly on a big stone with his eyes closed, and beside him were two children who were tied up. Sasuke. Shinichi, who recognized one of the children, frowned and immediately teased Kakuzu. "What? Is this the nine-tails Jinchuriki you caught?" Kakuzu replied, "The nine-tails Jinchuriki of Mai was captured by Orochimaru, but what Orochimaru wants is the child of your Uchiha. So after this matter is over, we can exchange with him." After leaving Mai, Kakuzu also came back to his senses and vaguely guessed that Orochimaru's target should be the Uchiha Sasuke in his hands. Shinichi didn't say anything, but looked at the two children tied up, and then his eyes fell on Ningxi and thought to himself, a child of the Hyuga family? On the battlefield, Jishui's face was extremely dignified. The defeat of the five Kage is like the collapse of the sky for him. He eagerly looked for the figures of the three generations and secretly made up his mind to fight to the death. He can't allow Nagato to kill Yagura and Chilabai in front of him. Whoosh! At this moment, two figures arrived on the battlefield. Jishui turned his head and looked, and his heart suddenly fell down. Chapter 507. On the broken cliff, the two figures who had just arrived stood quietly, one in front of the other. Whoosh! The night breeze blew past, causing his robes to flutter. The glistening moonlight shone on the sinister ghost mask, causing the originally mysterious figure to have an indescribable, faintly discernible aura. Conan subconsciously took a step back and whispered to Nagato, "Be careful." She has always believed that Nagato, who has the Rinnegan, is the strongest ninja in the shinobi world. But for some reason, every time she sees the hideous face of the leader of Amatsukami, Yama, she feels nervous and uneasy from the bottom of her heart. Nagato nodded seriously, his cold eyes locked on Yama. The last time they fought, Kuroto almost died in the hands of Yama, and that moment of despair was still fresh in his memory. Therefore, the most frightening person in the entire shinobi world is the leader of Amatsukami in front of him. Even if Kuroto is no longer the same as he was in the past, his fear of Amatsukami still hasn't diminished. At this time, Jishui tacitly retreated behind Hyojin, but because he is now dressed as a Mai ninja, he kept a certain distance from Hyojin and Itachi, who were dressed as Amatsukami. Hyojin, on the other hand, was under the tremendous pressure of Nagato, and the outer path demon statue behind Nagato carefully observed the battlefield. No way, how'd he do it? After glancing at the battlefield, Kuroto's brows slightly wrinkled under the demon mask, and his heart was filled with uncertainty. Around the cliff, there were nearly 100 ninjas from the 5 great shinobi villages lying on the ground. Many of them were elite jonin that Kuroto could remember by their names. In addition, Yandame Reikage, Yandame Kazakage, and Yandame Mizukage were also among the 3 Kages. Although they seemed to be still alive, it was obvious that they had completely lost the ability to fight. After scanning the messy battlefield, Hyojin shifted his gaze to Nagato. He found that Nagato had changed a lot compared to before. He was no longer as thin and miserable as before. The wooden cart under him was gone. His legs seemed to have completely recovered. Even his signature red hair of the Whirlpool family was full of vitality and looked brighter than before. Although Hyojin had guessed that Nagato must have used some means to recover from his injuries since he dared to attack Mai, he did not expect Nagato to recover so well. Moreover, he was so strong. If it were Hyojin facing so many strong enemies, even if he could win in the end, he would probably be heavily injured and his stamina and chakra would be at their limits. Oh no, he should be much stronger than me now. Looking at the calm and composed Nagato, Hyojin's brows wrinkled even tighter. In his impression, where Nagato's limit is, Hyojin can't say, because in the original story, Nagato was not defeated, but he pinned his hope on Naruto and resolutely chose to commit suicide. But at that time, Nagato was far from his limit. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to resurrect thousands of the dead at once. One must know that in the shinobi world, it is extremely difficult to resurrect the dead. In addition to the Rinnegan's natural reincarnation technique, the only other techniques that can accomplish this are the Sand Village Elders' self-reincarnation technique, the Grass Ninja Clan's Forbidden Technique, Dragon Life Reincarnation Technique, and the Mount Mayabuku's Sage's Talisman. Whether it is Self-Born Reincarnation Technique, Dragon Life Reincarnation Technique, or even Mount Mayabuku's Treasure Sage Talisman, all of them can barely resurrect one person. Being able to resurrect tens of thousands of the dead at once like Nagato is unique in the shinobi world. In other words, if Naruto failed to convince Nagato at that time, and there was no other force involved, then Naruto would most likely not be able to defeat Nagato. In fact, this point was reflected vividly in the battle between Naruto and Chalabi when they faced Nagato's impure earth form. It must be known that at that time, after the special training on Turtle Island, Naruto and the Nine Tails in his body had reached a reconciliation, and he could completely use the Nine Tails chakra in his body, becoming the perfect Jinchuriki. Coupled with the Immortal Talisman, his strength jumped to the Super Kage level, and the Eight Tails Jinchuriki. Chalabi was also at his peak, and he could perfectly coordinate with the Eight Tails in his body. But in the face of Nagato's impure earth form, Naruto and Chalabi, who were among the strongest in the Shinobi Alliance, had almost no ability to resist. They were easily crushed by Nagato's impure earth form, which had no fighting spirit and could only attack mechanically. If it weren't for Itachi's impure earth form getting rid of Duru's control through Kotoeme Tsukumi and sealing Nagato's impure earth form with the power of the artifact Tenseigan, it would be hard to say what the outcome of the Fourth Shinobi World War would have been. Therefore, Hyojin has always been very vague about where Nagato's limit is, and he doesn't have a clear idea. But no matter how strong Nagato is, it is impossible for him to defeat so many experts, including 4 generations of Mizukage, 4 generations of Kazekage, and 4 generations of Laying and Scathe. This is simply against common sense, and far beyond Hyojin's expectation. What happened to him? Why did his strength improve so significantly? And he looks so good. It's like he's a different person from when he was sitting on the wooden cart. The more Hyojin thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong.